Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 1st of October. Today, Conservative Party conference kicks off in Manchester. GB News will be there bringing you every twist and turn.
Yes, Rishi Sunak for the first time at party conference as Prime Minister, but will it be his last? Lots of unhappiness about the proposed cut to HS2, lots of unhappiness about the level of taxes, and plenty of rivals in his own party after his job.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today, but businesses say they're not prepared. And if ready meals and vapes are to be exempt, many people are asking if it goes far enough.
Also coming into force today is the Windsor framework, replacing the Northern Ireland Protocol. Unionists say it's just a border in the Irish Sea.
Day one of Rishi's deal. Will it be business superhighways or political green and red lanes with potholes?
Well, it's raining in Northern Ireland and it's obviously raining in Manchester. Let's find out a bit more about the weather. Here's Marco.
Hello, good morning. We've got a mixed bag of weather in store across the UK through the day today. There'll be some rain in some areas, sunshine elsewhere, but I'll have all the details later on.
And Aidan's got the sport for us this morning.
Yeah, good morning. Europe edging closer to victory in the Ryder Cup despite a late US rally yesterday in the Premier League. Defeats for both Manchester clubs and a VAR controversy denies Liverpool a point at Tottenham.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
I have to say, just before we came on air, I did say to you, it's not actually October, is it?
It is. I can't believe it. Already the first day of October. Nothing to look forward to now, except Christmas.
No, and when do you get your Christmas tree? We get ours last weekend in November.
Oh, I was going to say...
It's a bit early yet.
It's a bit early yet, yeah.
Yeah, last weekend in November.
Oh.
So it's like another month and we're buying Christmas trees.
Yes, I mean, I can't believe the pace of time at the moment. It seems like we didn't really have a proper summer.
No.
But already, obviously, we're kissing that goodbye. And, yeah, it's Christmas to look forward to now.
Scary, isn't it?
Don't like it.
You always know it's autumn when it's party conference season, of course, and it's going to be an interesting one for the Tories.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, day one of party conference, and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has already vowed to set out his vision for the country without taking the easy choices.
As he arrived for the four-day event in Manchester, he's announced that he will invest more than £1 billion of cash into towns, into high streets the government say have been overlooked.
But the conference isn't going to be plain sailing, of course. There's going to be pressure over issues like high-speed 2, HS2, and, of course, tax cuts. Or at least, because maybe not tax cuts, because they're just so unlikely, but at least the idea of no tax rises.
And I think there are going to be fireworks as well in all sorts of ways. But it's interesting, the front page lead of today's Sunday Times, Badenoch piles pressure on Sunak to quit the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. It's very interesting that Kemi Badenoch has decided to be so outspoken. First day of the conference, if you like. A lot of people are saying, is she positioning herself for some sort of leadership bid?
OK, let's get the lowdown then from our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's in Manchester. Morning, Catherine.
Good morning. Pretty dreadful weather here in Manchester, and Rishi Sunak is not going to have an easy time at this conference. They came up by car yesterday. There were no trains, and this huge ongoing row about HS2 that it's widely expected not ultimately to run to Manchester. Now, the Prime Minister very keen to shift the dial. They're still nearly 20 points behind in the polls. And the last couple of weeks, he's been a bit bolder, hasn't he, coming out with policies that he thinks will play well with many, such as rolling back softening on some of these green targets, potential scrapping of A-levels, etc. And we will wait to see what rabbits come out of the hat at conference. Today we hear about the money, the Levelling Up Fund for towns. We don't hear as much about levelling up as we did under Boris Johnson, did we? But very difficult for Rishi Sunak because all of the rivals are circling. There's plenty of people within the Conservative Party that assume that the next general election is already lost, and plenty of people who would really rather like to lead the Conservative Party. So we've heard a lot from Home Secretary Suella Braverman. We've heard from Kemi Badenoch this morning, has given an interview. And Liz Truss is going to be making a big speech tomorrow. And it's rumoured that she also has leadership ambitions. So difficult to manage his own party, let alone the wider political picture.
OK, Catherine, thanks very much indeed.
Shall we talk now to Scarlett Maguire, a former Labour advisor, been on the programme quite a lot as well, but I think we're joining you, I don't know, where are you, in sunny Spain or something at the moment? At least you're not in Manchester, where it's pouring.
I'm not. I'm in Athens. I'm in Athens on the last day of a holiday, not where I live.
No, I wonder if you'll even bother then watching what's going on in Manchester. I find it, don't you find it incredibly surprising that various people seem to be circling and possibly making leadership bids?
Well, it's because they've given up, isn't it? That's the problem. That's why they're doing it. So you have people like Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch within the cabinet, and then you have Priti Patel, who thinks that by staying out of the cabinet, she's proved herself. Now, I was going to say, as the first thing, is that the good news for the Tories is it can't be as bad as last year when you had Liz Truss and everything going down. But now that Liz Truss is thinking that she could be the next leader as well, I mean, this is a complete disaster.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it, when I know it's looking forward another week, but comparing and contrasting to Labour, obviously Labour's going to be a lot more buoyant than the Tories in many respects, understandably so, but they're still not putting a lot on the table. They're still not giving a lot for voters to say, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, what the Labour Party are doing is they're waiting, because if you put something good on the table, as they found out in the past, the Tories steal it. It's just that easy. So they're waiting, and the other reason they're waiting is to find out just what the economy is going to be like, and so what Labour can offer. But the difference between the two conferences, apart from the buoyancy, is there's going to be no circling around. There's going to be incredible discipline, as we saw in Liverpool last year, because what Labour are showing is we're fit to govern. We can govern the country. And in a way, the mood music is much, much more important than the individual policies. I mean, we in our bubble think policies are incredibly important. I mean, if you go on the doorstep, most people are not aware about policies. They're very aware about mood music. Are these people ready to govern?
I suppose one of the other most interesting things, actually, that will obviously interest Labour Party is the mood music towards when the next election will be called. Jeremy Hunt has been sort of hinting that it won't be until they get inflation down below 3% or something. And a lot of pundits are saying, well, that makes it probably later next year. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would assume it would be later. I mean, they unless there's an incredible blip in the polls and they think, let's go now. Let's go now when we stand a chance. I mean, what the Conservatives want to do is they want to win the next election, even though probably half the people, if not 3/4 of the people in Manchester, think it's already lost. So they'll be waiting for things to get better. And it's always that, is you keep hoping that next week will be good news. The problem for Rishi Sunak is, I mean, he's got the reverse Midas touch. You know, everything he does goes wrong. I mean, you had Immigration Week and the barge, the Bibi Stockholm, had to be emptied of people. You had Education Week and we found crumbly concrete in the schools. 140 had to be closed. So actually, one does wonder, thinking back to Theresa May and the speech going wrong with all the letters falling off, what's going to go wrong for Rishi this week?
Yeah, we've got to look on the positive, though. He says he's determined to make, well, hard choices, he says, in some respects. Yet he is creating some clear blue water, isn't he, on green issues. There seems to be a bit of a dividing line now, which is proving to be popular. You know, you have to say, when you look at the polls, these ideas about altering the timeline of net zero, the ideas about low traffic neighbourhoods and all these sort of things, they're popular with voters. You can tell what people want.
Well, I mean, let's remember that low traffic neighbourhoods is a Conservative idea, right? It came in with Boris Johnson. The government encouraged councils to do it. As far as the green stuff goes, I mean, I think it's completely shocking. And actually, the climate disaster is not going to wait, while we get our ducks in a row. And actually, had in 2010 David Cameron, instead of saying let's get rid of the green crap, done something, we would have insulated houses so that people would have much lower heating bills, and we would be less reliant on outside stuff. I mean, actually, the Rishi's green thing has completely divided the Conservative Party, and the Lib Dems, who are due to take a lot of seats in the South if it goes wrong for the Conservatives, are feeling very buoyant about it. So he might say he's brave, but I'm not quite sure who he's always playing to. Electric cars, the quicker we get them in, the quicker that we can have a second-hand car market in electric cars, so that most people who buy their cars second-hand can actually get electric cars.
OK, Scarlett, we're going to love you and leave you to your last day. Enjoy your last day of your holiday there in Athens. Thank you. Actually, staying on green issues, from today, businesses in England are banned from selling single-use plastic cutlery, polystyrene cups and food containers. It's all part of government efforts to reduce litter and protect the environment. But for many struggling business owners, it's coming at quite a price.
Yeah, Ray Addison went to Woodstock in Oxfordshire to find out how two very different outlets are dealing with the change.
Dirty streets and polluted waterways. That's the legacy of single-use plastics. However, from today, the government is forcing most business owners to go green or face tough fines. At the more than 300-year-old Blenheim Palace in Woodstock, they're replacing 500,000 single-use coffee cups with 17,000 that can be washed and returned, saving 35 tonnes of CO2. David Green is head of innovation.
We serve over 400,000 hot drinks at Blenheim, and many of those cups, even though they're compostable, can only be composted up to about 5% with food waste. So actually eradicating single-use cups really does fit into our overall strategy of becoming carbon neutral by 2027.
The company behind Blenheim's high-tech coffee cup revolution is Reuniverse, which offers a range of reusable food and drink containers. Founder Tony McGurk explains how it works.
This cup has some really neat technology in it. So it has a QR code on the side to give it an identity to you as a consumer, and it has underneath an RFID chip enabled in the cup itself, so that we know where the cup is and what it's doing when it gets returned. You'll go into a coffee shop, you'll buy your coffee as you normally would do, and you'll pay a deposit on that cup. So rather than here's a paper cup, throw it away, you now have a cup that is reusable and rewashable, and you've invested £2 in it, for instance. So if you want your £2 back, you'll make sure it comes back and gets washed and reused.
Do you need a receipt?
But revolutions are expensive. Just a few minutes walk away from Blenheim Palace is Smart's fish and chip shop. Owner Ricardo Camara says meeting the new regulations is costing him hundreds.
Plastic bags, cups, lids, boxes, bin liners, other bits and bobs. I'm going to lose easily £600 worth of items.
This is just the latest challenge Ricardo has faced to his livelihood. During COVID, he was forced to close down his restaurant. Now, after a brief time of being back on his feet, once again, he's worried for the future.
I lost big time money around the COVID. Then I decided to take this one over. I take another risk. Now this thing comes along again. Salt and vinegar on the chips?
Yes, please. Ricardo believes he has around 6 months to see if he can stay profitable. And in the meantime, his increased overheads will have to be passed on to his customers.
I cannot take from my own pocket, you know. So whatever I bring it in, I have to increase in the price.
The government says 95% of the public supports the single-use plastic ban, but at a time when many are struggling with the cost of living, its impact could help the environment but damage the high street. Ray Addison, GB News, Woodstock.
It's 6:15. If you've just joined us, let's remind you of the top stories this morning. And the Conservative Party conference starts in Manchester today. It's the first gathering since Rishi Sunak took over as Prime Minister. At GB News, he's going to be there throughout, bringing you every twist and turn.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today. Plastic plates, trays, cutlery, bowls and certain cups and containers will be banned. But disposable vapes and supermarket ready meals are not included.
Coming up for you, British troops were deployed in Ukraine for the first time, according to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, while our Navy may be moved into the Black Sea. Will that serve or harm our national interest? With the chip shop thing,
yeah,
why don't they go back to newspaper?
Ooh.
All those polystyrene boxes, they never used to exist.
No.
You just got everything in newspaper.
Do you know, I mean, I know everybody would say that would be a very backward step. It's not so, you know, hygienic. But it never killed any of us, did it, in the days when it was in newspapers?
No.
You could read while you ate.
It's recycling.
Yeah. And anyway, there's always a liner, you know, a sort of paper liner, isn't there?
Even if there isn't, it wouldn't do you any harm.
It didn't do us any harm, I don't think. It's going to get to the point where almost if you want to buy anything like that, you're going to have to take along your own Tupperware bowl or something, aren't you?
Maybe we'll
put the fish and chips in there.
Yeah, you see, I don't like the idea of that. However, I didn't like the idea of taking my own bags to the supermarket, and I've got used to that.
I think we will. We have to get used to it, don't we? It is immoral, the single-use plastic business. It's bad for everybody, really, isn't it? We'll get used to it. Now, the new Windsor framework border regime across the Irish Sea comes into force today. The post-Brexit legal agreement is intended to continue open trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic, whilst also reducing friction on trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain.
So it puts in new arrangements, including red and green lanes, with the aim of reducing the number of checks on goods, food in particular, heading into Northern Ireland ports from Great Britain, or the mainland.
Well, let's see if our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, can explain it for us. Doogie, because I think the rest of us find it's very, very complicated, as ever. Go ahead, give it a go.
Well, Anne, you're not the only one that finds it complicated. In fact, the only reason that I actually understand it is because of reporting on agriculture for so many years. When you take any trade deal down to the bare bones, it starts with food and energy, and then you take it back further than that. The food, you look at food on 4 hooves and 2 wings, I suppose, and you go from there. And really what you're looking at is a border in the Irish Sea, who owns the border and who controls the border. If you look at that like a neighbour's wall between 2 houses, both of you have access to the wall, but only one of you that owns the foundation can actually say what happens to the wall. And that's exactly what has happened with the Windsor Framework document. The EU now has control of the legislation on the Irish Sea border. This big border that runs down the Irish Sea is now controlled legislatively by the EU. So the SPS, the sterile protection checks that are in that, are controlled by Brussels and not by Great Britain. So they have said to Great Britain, look, whatever comes across this, we want to see what's coming across the wall and going into an area where there's a land border with the UK and the EU. And of course, that's Ireland. It's the only place of the UK that happens. And that has caused quite a few problems with supply routes in Northern Ireland over the past few years. And today we have to be careful on this because Rishi Sunak sold this deal as the best deal ever. And of course, what happened was businesses and all said, well, we have access to both sides and we don't need to do that much. And then the regulation for it didn't appear to the end of July. So now businesses are having to cope with all these pits at once. So what they've decided to do is phase in the framework document, and this is the best phase that people will see the easiest first, because this is to do with supermarkets and the goods coming in red and green lanes. So anything that comes in here, there will be a manifest of it. Europe will have had sight of it. It will go into the green lane and come straight into the supermarkets. Other stuff that are maybe even going to independent retailers may have a harder job. But they've also did this because politically in Northern Ireland, the framework document means that the unionists have come out of government here and will not go back in, because they say they have no say, no democratic say over the laws that are made here. And you would almost think that this was brought in now, so as people would say, well, what was all the fuss about? But the real stuff will come in January and October when customs regulations come into place, and they will be much tighter.
Well explained. Thank you very much, Doogie. Thank you. So the Windsor framework comes into force today. The ban on single-use plastics comes into force today. It is the 1st of October. Yeah. Wonder what the weather has in store for us. Let's go to...
Hello, I'm Marco Patenia. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far southwest of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the southeast, it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with 1 or 2 showers towards the north and northwest. In the sunshine towards the southeast, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, the mid-70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far southeast should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells towards the north and northwest and a few showers once again toward the far northwest of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down towards the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
Marco, thank you very much indeed. Still to come, Aidan McGee's going to be here talking about all the drama in the golf, because it's the last day of the Ryder Cup. This is Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:25. This is. Are you playing the piano?
I am.
Piano. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Right, shall we have a look at some of the stories coming into the newsroom right now? And it's been reported that British troops could be sent to Ukraine for the first time since the full-scale invasion began. According to the Sunday Telegraph, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has plans to move a British training programme, not a fighting one, a training one, into Ukraine. And that news comes following his visit to the country last week.
A fall in Ofgem's energy price cap is now in effect amid concerns that we could still end up paying about 13% more than last winter. The regulator announced in August that the cap on a unit of gas and electricity would reduce the average bill to under £2,000 for the next 3 months. Some analysts predict the cap will rise again in January because of increases in wholesale energy prices.
The US government has avoided a federal shutdown after both of the House of Representatives and the Senate approved a temporary funding bill to keep agencies open for another 45 days. That new package drops aid to Ukraine, but increases federal disaster assistance by $16 billion. And the bill funds the government until November the 17th. Funny, isn't it? The US government always seems to be on the brink of total shutdown.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Very odd. Aidan's got the sport for us this morning.
Hello.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
To see you. Yeah, so last day of the Ryder Cup then.
It is indeed. So there's nothing quite like a row to ignite proceedings, is there? I mean, let's be clear, Europe are right out in front yesterday. They've had a really stellar couple of days. They lead by 10.5 points to 5.5 points. But there was a late rally by the US yesterday. There were stories coming out of the US camp that Patrick Cantlay refused to wear a cap, the official Team USA cap, in protest at the fact that the players aren't getting paid. Now, you don't get paid to compete in the Ryder Cup. It's an invitational event. It's something you do because you're representing your continent or your country, in the case of the USA specifically. Now, what happened was that Patrick Cantlay, one of the players, got some stick from some of the crowd because of this protest, and some of the
bit of an odd protest.
Well, it was. So the fans started doffing their cap to him and saying they were singing songs about his bank balance and that kind of thing.
Right.
So he responded. He responded by knocking this 43-foot putt on the 16th green in response to that abuse, as a riposte, if you like. And his caddy walked across the line of Rory McIlroy, who he was up against. This is the foursome. Rory McIlroy was not happy with this at all. He said it's against golf etiquette. This carried over into the car park, where there was a slanging match between.
So it was deliberate?
Oh, well, I think it was a deliberate attempt to distract Rory McIlroy, to put him off his game. He's been in imperious form over the previous 36 hours or whatever. And as I say, sometimes big events turn on this. And it went into the car park. He had to be restrained by one of his teammates, Rory McIlroy, Shane Lowry, and bundled into a BMW 4x4 to get away from the course. Now, don't get me wrong, Europe are still in a very, very, very strong position. But sometimes
tempers are getting frayed.
Yeah, sometimes there's just a flashpoint can turn the course of events. You think back to the miracle of Medina in 2012 when USA were looking unassailable and Europe turned it round on the final day with some brilliant putting and brilliant long-range play by Ian Poulter. You'd need a turnaround of that kind of proportion for USA to retain the Ryder Cup. I still think Europe will be quite comfortable, but I don't think maybe we'll get the climax that we usually get on a Sunday night. But I just wonder whether the hat row has possibly ignited something in the USA and might just tip things and make things a little bit more interesting. We don't want it to be a complete read-through today.
I'm just a bit surprised because the Americans are very patriotic.
They are.
It seems sort of unpatriotic. You say, I'm not going to wear the cap because I'm not getting the dosh.
No, that's true. But then sometimes team sports in golf, it's a very individual thing. It's a bit like tennis, isn't it? You know, it's individual stuff. And then when suddenly the Davis Cup comes around and you're representing your country. But there has been precedent in the past of players not really warming to the Ryder Cup. Tiger Woods famously, he didn't make a big deal of it, but it was kind of well known on the circuit that he wasn't really a Ryder Cup player. He used to argue a little bit with Phil Mickelson, who's another big ego in the locker room, but he did go through the motions. He did win the Ryder Cup with the US, and he does have a very good record there. So there's no issues there when we look back on his career. But as I say, team sports in a sport which otherwise is quite a solitary existence isn't for everybody.
No,
clearly not.
No.
Somebody said something that offended, didn't they?
McIlroy's underway from 10 past 11 this morning. Ricky Fowler's up against Tommy Fleetwood, so we should go into the afternoon today and see some good golf.
Brilliant stuff. Aidan, thank you. We'll see you later on. It is 6:30 if you've just joined us. Let's remind you of the top stories this morning. The Conservative Party conference kicks off in Manchester today. It's the first gathering since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, and GB News will guide you through every twist and turn.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today. Plastic plates, trays, cutlery, bowls and certain cups and containers will be banned. But disposable vapes and supermarket ready meals are not included in the ban.
And also coming into force today, the Windsor framework replacing the Northern Ireland Protocol. The deal is meant to ease controls on goods entering from the mainland, but some unionists still see it as a border in the Irish Sea. We're going to break it all down for you from Belfast with all the details.
Lots more still to come, including that story about Navy personnel being told to introduce themselves with pronouns in guidelines. We'll have headline makers next with Tom Slater and Nabila Ramdani. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At 6:33, let's have a quick skim through the front pages for you this morning. The Mail on Sunday has the Home Secretary hitting back at Sir Elton John's criticism over the government's handling of the migrant crisis.
The Observer leads with a story that the Education Secretary has kept secret files on people who are critical of schools' policies.
The Independent has the Tories heading for a wipeout at the election, according to a new poll.
And the Sunday Telegraph leading with the Defence Secretary's comments that British troops will be sent to Ukraine, not to fight, though, but to help train their troops. But it's the first time we'll actually be sending people into Ukraine, isn't it?
Yes. I don't know why we'd need to go. We've already got people on the borders. Going in just seems to be asking for trouble. Anyway, we'll try and get more detail on that. Let's go through some of those then with the editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and the broadcaster, Nabila Ramdani. Good to see you both this morning. Tom, let's have a look at the Sunday Times. Because as conference kicks off today in Manchester for the Tories, it seems like Kemi Badenoch is really piling the pressure on her boss.
She is, and no doubt also flying her own kind of flag for the future leadership contest to come. But she's given an interview here to the Sunday Times where she, as you say, kind of puts pressure on Rishi Sunak on a number of fronts, one of which being the European Court of Human Rights, making very clear that it's not racist, as she would say, to discuss leaving the ECHR to deal with the migration crisis. She also says that she would be pretty relaxed about further relaxation of net zero, saying we're only 1% of emissions, there's no point bankrupting ourselves in order to meet this. All of these issues on which Rishi Sunak has moved somewhat, shall we say, but there is certainly pressure from not just the backbenchers, but even with his own cabinet to go a little bit further or be prepared to go a bit further if the case calls for it. But so much of this is also swirling around the fact that most people seem to assume that Rishi Sunak's going to lose the next election, and therefore they're all kind of jockeying for position with that in mind, it seems like.
Yeah.
You don't think they're jockeying for position for before an election, do you?
Well, I think that's what will make the conference fascinating, because they're all coming up with radical propositions, if you like. I think Badenoch's proposal to leave the European Court of Human Rights sounds easy enough, but I think it will come with multiple associated problems, not least of all because the court underpins the Good Friday Agreement, for example. So pulling Britain out would cause a lot of problem in Northern Ireland.
But would it negate? Would it though? Would it immediately negate any agreements done through the ECHR historically?
Probably not immediately, but it would certainly undermine its authority. And I think more generally the court would remove a good opportunity for people to challenge the state. But having said that, there's also a lot of grievance at the way the court can scupper policies of democratically elected politicians. So all these arguments have to be considered. It's not as simple as Badenoch makes out. But I think Tom is absolutely right. I mean, it all ties in with a leadership contest for the Tory leadership. And this echoes, in a way, Braverman's multiculturalism speech in Washington, D.C. And I think it's no coincidence that she made that speech in America. UK politicians who show off in America tends to get a lot more coverage at home. If she had made that same speech in her own constituency in Hampshire, I think it would have had less impact.
And interestingly, there seem to be about as many people in the audience at that speech as there would have been at a constituency meeting. As you say, it was made to be filmed, really. But it is interesting on the ECHR question, which is to see how opinion is kind of turning. First of all, because you've got many prominent Tories talking about it quite openly. It's something Tory leaders have flirted with in the past, but there's often never really been as much of a viable proposition. We've seen Jonathan Sumption, former Supreme Court Justice, come out recently to say that he would support leaving the ECHR, that we don't need the ECHR to protect human rights. And I think that argument is going to become much more conservative.
Do we need the ECHR to protect our human... I'm just thinking of when we have a problem, just us, never mind migrants, us already. We have a problem with something in the state. At least we always feel you've got the European Court of Human Rights to appeal to. If we lost that, would that be a real problem?
I don't think it would be. I mean, not least because if you think about some of the most core human rights, things like freedom of speech, for instance, that is something that's been encroached upon, not just in Britain, but in France and other countries successively, and that's been something which has happened underneath the umbrella of European-wide human rights legislation. And it's also, I think, is a problem when you've got essentially a foreign court making rulings which impinge upon democratic lawmaking, and it's because it's not just about saying this is what the law is.
But that's how you perceive it, isn't it? Is it a foreign court? I mean, we set it up. We set it up, didn't we? And I can see how it's a vote winner to say get rid of it if people are being very anti-EU, but it's not actually part of it. It's nothing to do with the EU,
it is separate,
is it?
That's true. But
It is separate, but it's still perceived as a foreign entity interfering with domestic politics, where democratically elected politicians, are making legislation. It's perceived as interference. Some would argue it's necessary to have checks and balances to override, perceived problems at home. But I don't think that... I think the point about having democratically elected politicians be in charge of their own policies is a very valid one and a very strong argument.
But it was all... I mean, it's all off the backdrop of the Second World War, isn't it, essentially?
I think essentially...
Which is where you say democratically elected governments are not necessarily doing the right thing.
Yes, I think it was set in a context of, obviously, of intense fighting amongst neighbours, and it was all aimed at pacifying everyone and, bringing about some checks and balances so as to avoid extremism. But, at times things need to be reviewed. We live in a different era, one might argue.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? But it's one of those things I think a lot of us say, oh, no, we need to keep it or we need to get rid of it, wherever you sit on it, without actually quite understanding what it does.
The depth of it.
I think one thing that would be positive, regardless, is that it's very easy for politicians to hide behind these external organisations. It certainly happened with the EU. Something goes wrong, we can't do anything because of the EU. Similarly, with the ECHR, there's all sorts of things which could be quite convenient for domestic government. So that's one of the reasons why I think leaving it would be positive for democracy as far as it peels away another excuse when it comes to what politicians can.
Well, I have to say, no matter what any politician says, I'm more intrigued by what that former Supreme Court Justice has to say, because he's someone who really understands what it does.
In The Spectator last week, I think.
Yeah, if he's saying we shouldn't be in it, then that actually does make me think a little bit. Let's have a look at the situation in Ukraine, Shadrina Billa. This is the Sunday Telegraph this morning. Grant Shapps, who's now Defence Secretary, saying we could have boots on the ground in training programmes.
Yes, I mean, on the face of it, the headline sounds very dramatic.
It does, yeah.
Because that would be some kind of escalation. But as the article makes clear as you read on, it will be army leaders. I mean, Grant's chap has been talking with army leaders about shifting an official British-led training programme into the Ukraine rather than relying on UK and other NATO members' bases. So
we would be the first to send people physically into Ukraine.
Yes, precisely.
And you just wonder how that will then be perceived in Moscow.
Well, I'm assuming it's not going to go down well, but I would also say that sending British combat troops into the Ukraine would certainly not be widely accepted in the UK. I think that would be seen as a step too far, bearing in mind that escalation in any war is always very frightening, especially when you already have a devastating war threatening to expand to the rest of
I mean, well, even if you go under the shroud of saying it's not NATO interference, it's merely a training programme, which then is questionable in and of itself, those boys and girls will be a target.
Precisely.
They will have an absolute target on their back.
And why send them into Ukraine when we're already training their
them
troops?
over here?
Yeah, over here and on the border.
Yes.
One wonders why go into Ukraine?
But certainly Russia and its very powerful allies, such as China and Iran, would see that as an escalation.
Yes,
and
well, it is an escalation, frankly.
It is.
It's another step forward, isn't it?
Forward.
I have to say, I don't feel very comfortable with that.
And especially because, as you say, there's so much which is going on just across the border in Poland. In his comments in the interview, even says, we'll move into the west of Ukraine. I mean, what really is the... I'm not an expert on these matters, but being in Lviv rather than, the edge of Poland doesn't make loads of sense.
And in Moscow, they will say it's a lie, they are combat troops, won't they? That's what they'll say.
And as you say, even mishaps could be potentially catastrophic here. It could be a situation in which it's not Moscow saying, let's target this base because we know there are British troops there. It could just be things happen in the context of war, which could easily spin out of control. But,
and turn into world war. Russia is a nuclear power.
No, exactly.
Who is Iran?
And, of course, it is always worth remembering that if, the first foreign power to put its boots on the ground were Russian invading troops, but still, you do think that surely we have to box clever where these things are concerned to make sure it doesn't spread beyond those borders.
Yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts if you're in the armed forces this morning and watching. We'd keep it confidential, but would you see that as a good idea? If you've been out there training, I know some people who've been out training there in Poland, would you welcome the opportunity to go actually into Ukraine and do the training? I mean, what would happen if you came under attack? You've just got to literally stand there and
exactly.
not pick up arms. It's just very odd.
Did Grant Shapps get a bit carried away with himself when he went over to Zelensky?
Maybe he's new into the job.
Zelensky's very persuasive, isn't he?
Yeah, he's new into the job and he probably wants to make a statement.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully he'll be cross-examined about it in the Tory party conference over the next few days.
Yeah. Sticking with armed forces and things, though, Tom, in the Sunday Telegraph, the Navy says use pronouns.
Yes, so this is a guidance document which was recovered by the by the Sunday Telegraph, by Stephen Edgington, the reporter there, on the internal kind of Navy intranet, which it was Inclusion Week last week, if anyone missed it.
Inclusion Week?
National Inclusion Week.
Gosh.
Excuse me. And there was this particular document encouraging staff to use pronouns, to avoid microaggressions, to even suggest that this is the micromanaging, and this is fascinating. Don't give people unwelcome compliments, all this kind of stuff that you see floating around.
It does get too much.
And it is part of an interesting trend, which is to say we often talk about these ridiculous woke, guidelines going around corporations, going around universities, going around different kind of institutions. But it's happened within the armed forces as well. There's been a sort of string of scandals like this, even more serious things, like a case recently of the RAF being found to have discriminated against white recruits because of the need to meet diversity targets. So it's just interesting that even when we're talking about the armed forces, the armed wing of the states, places that you would think would be naturally a bit more sceptical, or at least naturally have other things to focus on rather than what words
But when
we
they
may or
say
may not
use
use.
pronouns, what do they mean?
So, for instance,
You'd have to say you were she, her.
At the beginning of meetings, apparently it should be good practice to say, hello, my name is Anne, and I'm she, her, etc., which is a kind of interesting...
In the military, you had a sort of rank. Anyway, you just...
No, exactly. Surely colonel or lieutenant or whatever it is,
captain or something.
captain would make a lot more sense. The one thing I never understand about the pronouns thing is no one ever uses your pronouns such as it is when you're there in
when
front
you're there.
it's something which
it's almost pompous to talk about yourself in the third person.
Just call me captain.
Well, yeah. I mean, look,
doesn't make a hell of a lot.
If you want to explain your pronouns, then I've no beef with it. But I don't think it should be obligatory.
No, exactly. That's always the difference.
Anyway, look, if you've just joined us, it is 6:46. Let's just remind you of the main news this morning.
And the Conservative Party conference kicks off today in Manchester. As the first gathering since Rishi Sunak took over from Liz Truss gets started, GB News will be there throughout, bringing you every twist and turn, and there are going to be a lot of them.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today. Plastic plates, trays, cutlery, bowls, lots of things will be banned, but disposable vapes and supermarket ready meals aren't included.
And coming up, users of certain social media apps will soon be able to chat to famous figures such as rapper Snoop Dogg and tennis star Naomi Osaka, and that's all thanks to AI. Futurist Andrew Eborn is going to explain. So you won't be really talking to them, you'll be talking to their AI.
Well, I can't wait to have a chat with Snoop Dogg.
No, absolutely. Been looking forward to that for years.
Well, it's gone mad. The world has gone mad. If you had a celebrity an AI celebrity you could talk to, would it be Nabila?
I don't know.
Tom Hanks or somebody? Can you imagine you being a Tom Hanks fan?
No, not really. Frankly, I have to say, in my experience working as a journalist, I've never really been impressed by celebrities or bigwigs. I always find the most interesting people are ordinary people, down-to-earth people who come up with the most extraordinary, moving stories, always. And
actually, one of the columnists in one of the papers today I was reading asks, do we have heartthrobs anymore? Do youngsters have heartthrobs? Because they were mourning the death of Ilya Kuryakin, who... what's his name? Oh, this is terrible. I can't think of his name. I think of him, famous actor. Anyway, he was the man from Uncle.
Oh,
David McCullum. He was 90 when he died last week, which is very sad because he was the one I did have a poster on the wall.
Did you?
Yeah. He was the absolute heartthrob of my generation of little girls.
See, I really just think of him from NCIS, where obviously he was a much older person.
He was, yeah. No, but he was an absolute heartthrob in the sort of 60s, really, I
suppose. What was his character called?
Ilya Kuryakin.
Oh, there you
go.
You
see, I mean, honestly, he was a heartthrob. So who was your heartthrob? Did you have one? As a teenager, you must have had a heartthrob.
I don't think it was allowed.
Whether it's allowed or not, you had them. Who was your heartthrob, Tom?
Oh, I can't remember.
Well, this is terrible.
But it's also... is there a sense that this doesn't exist now?
Yes.
The kind of poster on the wall thing? I don't keep touch with... youth culture.
I would disagree on that, though, from my experience of youth with my niece and nephew. I don't know about nephew, I don't know either.
Do they have posters on their bedroom walls?
Isabel always did.
Yeah?
It was always the Vamps.
Oh,
really?
The
Vamps, yes, and Brad.
Did you have, then, is it something that only little girls have? Did you have a heartthrob?
I had posters on the wall when I went to university.
Naughty posters.
No.
No.
Things one couldn't discuss at this time of the morning.
No. To be honest, River Phoenix.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Oh, wow. So people you admired, wanted to be like?
Well, fancied, really.
Yeah.
That's basically what it boils down to, isn't it?
Oh, well, that's one for you. Please get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.com. Who was your heartthrob? And are heartthrobs alive and kicking today? And are there still posters on bedroom walls?
See, Athena, do you remember Athena?
Oh, yes.
And it was always that...
It
was the man, the hunky fella holding the baby.
Yeah.
There was a thing in the papers the other day, that baby, she's now about 30 or something.
Oh. Of course, there was the very famous Athena poster of the tennis girl walking away.
Oh, with a bottom
scratching her
hanging
bottom
out.
or something, yeah. It was one of the most famous posters ever.
Disgusting.
No, it wasn't disgusting. It was a bit saucy, but that's all.
Disgusting. Anyway, let's, can we have a look at this? This is from Instagram this morning, Nabila. Dogs and costume parties. Have we got
It's a doggy daycare.
Doggy daycare.
And
I mean,
somebody
honestly.
took their dog to a doggy daycare and they had a big party, and it was a costume party for the dogs. Oh, here we go.
So what have we got?
The dogs are all... Well, they've got hats on.
We're not trying very hard. Oh, that's a bit...
Oh, no, that's a nice one. Yeah, we're seeing, just in case you're listening on the radio, we're seeing a doggy daycare place with all very excitable dogs. One's got a sort of trilby hat on, look very posh.
They've got
T-shirts
on and...
They had I mean, those dogs knew there was a sense of party about it. Oh, look at them, they're all excitable.
It's a posh thing to have a daycare for doggies in the first place.
My dog was expelled from doggy daycare.
I'm not surprised.
Did he misbehave?
It's all down to the parents.
She was too yappy, apparently, and she
really?
just wound everybody up.
You think they'd be able to...
She's not yappy at home, but apparently in a doggy daycare, she went very, very yappy, and they expelled her.
Isn't that what dogs are supposed to do? Yap away.
Well, yeah.
But they said, she's winding up all the other dogs.
Would you dress a doggy up?
You know what? We were never allowed a pet in the house.
Oh, you've had a miserable upbringing.
Well, my mum had 5 kids.
No saucy posters. No pets.
Well, I'll tell you the posters. My parents were more concerned about damaging the wallpaper.
Yeah.
And as far as pets were concerned, my mum had 5 children, so she thought she had 5 pests at home.
Oh, yeah.
And any extra pet would add
that
to
is
the
a
misery.
handful.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. What about you, Tom?
I don't get the whole dressing up dogs thing.
I don't.
You know, I feel bad for them. It's like you turn them into a little joke for...
Because they don't know they're dressed up, do they? They just...
Aside from, you've got like a whippet or something, and he's put a jacket on because it's cold, or something. That's fine.
Yeah.
Anything more whimsical than that, I start to,
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm like that. They look nicer left alone.
People with white, fluffy dogs, like what mine is, some people dye their hair and make them look all... Yeah, they actually
abuse.
go
You should call the
all
RSPCA.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it is abuse. It just shows they know they're being loved, don't they, if they're being pampered?
Well, I suppose. So as long as it doesn't do him any harm.
And when you said some people do that, did you mean yourself, Anne?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't do that. Although I've looked at her several times and thought, that would be quite fun. But no. She then looks back at me with that wilting look.
Yes, she would.
Shall we have a look at this Instagram also of a Wilko store? Because you know that Wilko stores are closing down all over the place. Well, the one in Worksop held a closing ceremony that apparently was very emotional.
Pleasure. We've had us ups, we've had us downs, but we're a great team. All of you have been a great team. It's not our doing that it's failed. It's down to one particular person. She's a I'll play his part at some point, but 26 years we've had here and we've enjoyed every minute. So thank you very much for coming in.
Well, I think it's right that they get a
lovely.
send-off like that.
So do I. Rather than just being sent home and saying, right, that's the last day, don't turn up tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think it's nice because, as that lady was saying, 26 years with some people, it's a long time.
It's a lifetime. And I have to say, I mean, I used
You build
to...
friendship,
I used to live in Wilko's. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're always in Wilko's.
Just to get bits and pieces and gadgets
and pieces
and stuff.
And, cheap stuff and whatever. Always in Wilko's. It's a real shame when these things shut down.
Yes, it is. I think they face so much competition from online retailers that it's a trend that's becoming inevitable.
And people buy everything, because that seems to be the new shift of the last few years, is that whilst people would buy bigger things online, or, you know, buy things where you need to kind of big catalogue of things, but you want to be able to get any DVD you want to get any album you want or whatever. People increasingly, especially during the pandemic, were buying everything, even the kind of odds and sods that you would normally go to a shop like Wilko to get. You can just get a big...
you could buy online. Actually, it's interesting because John, one of our viewers, has been in touch saying, once again, he's talking about Rishi Sunak's plans for sinking £1 billion into the high streets or something. He says, once again, another wasted scheme of taxpayers' money, £1 billion to regenerate the high street. So petrol prices are going through the roof once again, and then local councils charging through the roof for car park charges. That is why people stay at home and order online. One click and you get it. But if you want to go to your local high street, you've got to pay for petrol and car park charges, ULEZ, everything else. No wonder people are buying online.
No, I think that's a really important point. I mean, it does feel like that things were shifting in that direction anyway, but it certainly wasn't helped by the fact that it's making it increasingly difficult for people to go to those high streets, which, when you ask people, they do want to support them. It's just the fact that sometimes that extra convenience gets in the way. But yeah,
you've got to change the high street. That's what I've said for a long time. It's not good throwing money at it, saying, well, let's keep the high street alive and life support. You've got to change what the high street is, because it's a changing. It's just a changing scenario.
The end of British high streets mean the end of so many communities, and that's what's so sad about it. And it's also the end of a wonderful aspect of British life, but as you said, pouring money into it, I'm not sure if that's the...
no, you've got to spend the money in the right way.
Yeah. Look, we've got to leave it there. Nabila, Tom, thank you. We'll catch you a little bit later on.
Right now, we'll find out what the weather's going to be like for us.
Hello, I'm Marco Patagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far south-west of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the south-east, it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with 1 or 2 showers towards the north and north-west. In the sunshine towards the south-east, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, amid 70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far south-east should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells towards the north and north-west and a few showers once again toward the far north-west of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down towards the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
Just quickly on the plastic ban and what fish and chip shops are going to do. Jim says eating fish and chips out of a newspaper was always revolting. You get... See, disagree. This sounds great to me. You get print on your hands, grease would seep through.
It would, but
yeah,
you know,
but that was
part of it, wasn't it? Margaret agrees. Why on earth would anyone want to go back to eating from newspaper? It is, and always was, a filthy thing to do.
I'd do it tomorrow, Margaret. I just would.
Grease-proof paper, don't you?
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 7 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 1st of October. Today, the Conservative Party conference kicks off in Manchester, and we'll be there bringing you every little detail.
Yes, Rishi Sunak's first Conservative conference as Prime Minister, but could it be his last? They're way behind in the polls, lots of unhappiness within the party about the level of tax, and plenty of rivals who want his job.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today, but businesses say they're not prepared. And with ready meals and vapes to be exempt, many are asking if the bill goes far enough.
And users of some social media apps will soon be able to chat to famous people like Snoop Dogg and tennis star Naomi Osaka, all thanks to artificial intelligence. Our favourite futurist will tell us more. I've never heard of either of those people.
No, I wouldn't want to. I know. Marco, though, is here with your latest weather forecast.
Hello, good morning. We've got a mixed bag of weather in store across the UK through the day today. There'll be some rain in some areas, sunshine elsewhere, but I'll have all the details later on.
Aidan's got the sport for us this morning.
Yes, indeed. In the Premier League, Liverpool are denied a point at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium by a VAR fiasco. Meanwhile, at the Rugby World Cup, Scotland keep their faint hopes of glory alive with a crushing win over Romania.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I think it's a bit grim when Naomi Osaka, she must be very famous in the tennis world, but I wouldn't want to chat to her on
AI or anything else.
She
What would you say anyway? I just don't get that.
No.
And why would you want to do it if you know, actually, you're not talking to the real person? You know, you're a big fan of somebody like Elton John or Tom Hanks, as you were talking about. If you're a huge fan, yes, you might want to talk to them really in real life, but why would you want to talk to them via AI when you know it's not them?
Yes.
It's just something that sounds like them.
Yeah, sounds and looks like them, but you know it's not actually them.
No, it's weird.
It's very odd. Anyway, Andrew Eborn will explain all a little bit later on.
And we're also asking, is the era of the heartthrob over? Who was your heartthrob that maybe you had a picture of them posted up on your bedroom wall or something when you were younger? Because one of the columnists is saying they don't make heartthrobs like what they used to.
No, I suppose, but is that just because people
true.
don't buy posters in the same way and all that sort of thing? Imagine, maybe they do.
Maybe they do.
It's always pop stars, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Pop stars and movie stars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I would have had a poster of the Beatles up, particularly Paul.
Yeah.
I would have had it. But I know I did have a picture of David McCullum, Ilya Kuryakin from The Man from U.N.C.L.E., who sadly died last week, aged 90. I mean, my goodness, that puts it in perspective. But he wasn't just he wasn't just Man from U.N.C.L.E. And what did you say you used to see?
Oh, NCIS. He was in that for a long, long time. Brilliant.
But I mean, he was in those old post-war type movies. He was in a lot of them. In fact, am I right in saying that he was in The Great Escape?
Oh, I don't know.
He certainly was in a lot of those sort of wartime movies.
Didn't have a poster of David Niven up, did you?
No, not David Niven. He was wonderful, though, David Niven, wasn't he? Oh, they don't make heartthrobs like that anymore, do they?
No, probably not.
Get in touch anyway, gbviews@gbnews.com. Who was your heartthrob?
Now, it is the first day of Conservative Party conference and the Prime Minister has already vowed to set out his vision for the country without, he says, taking the easy choices. That's a bit ominous.
Well, as he arrived for the four-day event in Manchester, he announced that he is going to invest more than £1 billion worth of cash into towns, literally into the high streets, is what he's saying, because he says the high street has been overlooked.
But the conference isn't going to be plain sailing, of course, because there's going to be pressure from his own party over things like HS2, immigration, of course, and net zero.
Of course, there could be some fireworks this week. To tell us more, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is there in Manchester. Morning, Catherine. Still raining, I see. So a bleak outlook for Rishi Sunak, or will he have an easy ride?
Oh, I certainly don't think he will have an easy ride. Welcome to a very rainy Manchester, a city that's not too keen on the Conservatives at the best of times. And of course, given all the speculation that it looks almost certain the government is going to scrap the planned leg of HS2 finishing in Manchester, this is a really difficult time to be in this city. Now, Rishi Sunak is desperate to shift those polls. They were about 20 points behind. In the last couple of weeks, he's been a lot bolder. One poll suggests the gap might be beginning to close. So he's announced policies like softening some of these green targets. And yesterday we heard that he's going out to bat on the side of the motorist, given that the Conservatives managed to hold on to Uxbridge largely because of opposition to the ultra-low emission zone. And today we hear money for high streets, badly needed, of course. We don't hear that much about levelling up from this current iteration of the Conservative government. But even aside from his problems in the polls and the message to the country, he's got a battle to sort of keep a lid on the various factions within his own party, because there's plenty of Conservatives who pretty much think that the next election is already lost. So their focus is positioning themselves to give themselves the best possible chance when there is a leadership contest. So we've seen Home Secretary Suella Braverman very prominent in the last week, making her views about the ECHR known. Today we've got an interview with Kemi Badenoch, the same, saying we should be pulling out of the ECHR. Another 30 Tories signing a letter to the Prime Minister saying they won't vote for any tax rises. And last year we had the Liz Truss government at conference in Birmingham imploding because of her unfunded tax cuts. This year, we have a battle going on within the Conservative Party asking for tax cuts. So there's nothing easy about the time Rishi Sunak's going to have here, and we can expect all these leadership contenders to be very prominent. Liz Truss is giving a big speech tomorrow, so plenty of rivals circling, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting few days.
It certainly will be. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. Let's talk to former Labour advisor and associate editor at Labour Uncut, Kevin Marr, who joins us now. He's in Sheffield. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you. I mean, look, presumably the key strategy at conference is going to be to actually create some clear blue water between the Tories and the Labour Party.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the purpose, really, of the big party conference speech, especially when you're the party of government and Prime Minister. I mean, it's quite a thought, really, that Rishi Sunak's not even been in office for 12 months. It's been a real long, hard, grinding roller coaster year. And it's been a very, very tough Parliament as well, of course, with COVID and everything else that's gone on, the end of Brexit and what have you. So it, it feels like we've been going for a very long time. But this is Sunak's last best chance to speak directly to the country, to set out his stall, to update the public on his priorities that he enunciated earlier in the year, which is to improve growth, cut inflation, cut debt, sort out the small boats issue and the NHS as well. And I think if you were trying to be generous, you'd say it's a mixed scorecard on all 5 of those areas, those priority areas. So he comes into this week, I think, slightly vulnerable. He's got a lot of people circling, obviously, for his job. Welcome to being Prime Minister. That happens to everybody. But he's got to try and spell out how he gets the Conservatives out of the hole that they're in, freshens them up, and is able in the next 12 months to go back to the country in a general election and say, give me 5 more years because I'm getting most things right. And that at the moment is really, I think, quite a tall order.
Yeah, and even today, first day of the conference, they're announcing things that obviously are designed to make positive headlines. But are they going to convince anyone? Things like this £1 billion to be flushed into the nation's high streets. It feels a bit desperate, doesn't it?
It's a drop in the ocean. I mean, that's the kind of, I think what you tend to find often for the start of any governing party's conference week is that you've tried to cobble together some, as you say, eye-catching announcements. Whether there's a lot of substance to them is a moot point. £1 billion is obviously a lot of money spread across the country, trying to revive every dilapidated city and town high street. It is going to go nowhere, frankly. So again, the devil's often in the detail. Rishi Sunak's big problem this week is that he's not made enough progress against his priority areas. We've still got an economy and a cost of living crisis, a lot of people struggling, and a lot of the legacy, of course, from his predecessor, Liz Truss, who's doing the rounds, as your correspondent was saying a few minutes ago, doing the rounds this week. Now, the big problem he's got, I think, with Liz Truss is that as she seeks to rehabilitate her reputation, which was obviously pretty trashed after her 44 days in charge last year, she does so at the cost of Rishi Sunak's reputation. So everything she says appears to be a coded criticism of Sunak. And the more she kind of draws attention, the more effectively she campaigns against her own party and government. Now, I think there will be a lot of Conservative activists and a lot of Conservative MPs that will be quite annoyed about that. And it might be that actually if Rishi Sunak wanted to do something really big and really bold this week to really get the headlines, well, why not remove the whip from Liz Truss? I mean, that would really, I think, pull attention to him. He wants to position himself this week as no more Mr. Nice Guy. He's getting down to business. He's going to get very, very tough. And we've got a reshuffle, we're told, coming up. Well, assert your authority. Look in the sense of what Keir Starmer has done with Jeremy Corbyn. When you do something big and bold like that, remove the whip from a predecessor who is regarded as an electoral liability, it really does get noticed and people perhaps give you a second hearing. And this is what this week is all about for Rishi Sunak. It's getting a second hearing. Yeah,
what about the Labour Party in all of this, though? Because whilst, we know that a lot of the delegates, a significant number of delegates at Tory party conference are thinking, whatever happens, we're not going to win the next election. 100% of delegates at the Labour Party conference are going to be thinking, we're going to win this. We've got it in the bag. We haven't got any policies that we've announced anywhere yet. No one really knows what we stand for, but we're still going to win. There's a danger of complacency there, isn't there?
There is always a danger of complacency, and I think what you tend to find with a lot of Labour people, certainly anybody of my age that remembers the 1992 general election, is that if you start to think it's in the bag, fate has a habit of creeping up on you and changing your plans. So I think at the very top of the Labour Party, the people around Keir Starmer, they will be very cautious that actually this government does appear to be running out of road, does appear to be running out of life force, does appear to be running out of ideas, and a lot of its bad luck is catching up on it. But that doesn't mean necessarily that they're absolutely done in. I mean, some of the polls, even in the last week, are showing a narrowing. And that at this period, 12 months out possibly from an election, is not unrecoverable for Rishi Sunak. If he plays the game really, really well over the year, and he's lucky that if inflation starts to drop back and the cost of living crisis starts to abate a little bit, and if the winter pressures on the NHS are manageable, that actually getting into next spring, he might not be in too bad a shape. But he's got to try and he's got to be master of his own party. And I think at the moment he's struggling to assert that authority. We're told there's going to be a big cabinet reshuffle ahead of the King's speech. We've got a couple of by-elections in a few weeks' time, which may be very difficult for him. But if he holds them, again, the moment and the mood changes often very quickly in politics. We've got the autumn statement as well. If the economy looks to be in slightly better health than some people think, if there is a prospect of tax cuts, perhaps in the budget next March, then all of a sudden the game can change very, very quickly. But it just strikes me the obvious thing that Sunak can do to assert his authority over a fractious party with some of his colleagues openly sort of showcasing their wares, as it's like, is to take on Liz Truss. She's absolutely toxic for the Conservatives, for everybody that's now paying higher mortgage rates due to her incompetence last year. Sunak should hold her to account, withdraw the whip. It would be a really strong thing to do.
Wow, I mean, that would be pretty brutal, wouldn't it? But exciting things probably are going to happen in the next few days. You can't help but feeling, though, that it's going to be the Labour Party conference that's going to be the one to watch to see whether or not they really can lay out their wares impressively enough. But, Kevin, thanks very much indeed. Great to see you this morning.
Yes, I don't know, the idea of taking the... Has she done anything that would warrant...
No, that's why I think it would be brutal. Only if she says something else, you know, amazing.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if that would cause more problems.
Just make the Tories look so badly divided. I mean, there are still a lot of people who like what she said and actually admire what she did and tried to do. So, no, I don't think he can do that.
But Kevin's a man who knows his business.
Yeah.
Mind you, he might be trying to swing things in the other direction.
But like I say, I think it's going to be fascinating watching the Labour Party conference because Keir Starmer's got to come out as potential Prime Minister material.
He's got to be able
He's got to make a great speech, and quite a few others have got to come over impressive, or they'll lose it.
Well, they need to tell us something, don't they?
Well, yes.
They need to tell us what they're going to do, rather than just criticise the government. Anyway,
but Scarlett Maguire was saying just an hour ago, wasn't she, that the trouble with them saying what they want to do is that then the Tories pinch their ideas. Well, I'm not sure that's awfully true, but you can see why they're wary.
Yeah, well, you know, look, it happens. It happens, but, you know, if they want our vote, they've got to tell us what they're going to do. And at the minute, we're not getting that.
We're not getting a lot, are we?
Anyway, one thing that we do know is happening is that from today, businesses in England are being banned from selling single-use plastic cutlery, polystyrene cups, food containers. It's all part of the government's plans to reduce litter and, more importantly, really, protect the environment, protect the seas. But for many struggling business owners, of course, it does come at a price.
Our reporter Ray Addison went to Woodstock in Oxfordshire to find out how two very different outlets are dealing with this change.
Dirty streets and polluted waterways. That's the legacy of single-use plastics. However, from today, the government is forcing most business owners to go green or face tough fines. At the more than 300-year-old Blenheim Palace in Woodstock, they're replacing 500,000 single-use coffee cups with 17,000 that can be washed and returned, saving 35 tonnes of CO2. David Green is head of innovation.
We serve over 400,000 hot drinks at Blenheim, and many of those cups, even though they're compostable, can only be composted up to about 5% with food waste. So actually eradicating single-use cups really does fit into our overall strategy of becoming carbon neutral by 2027.
The company behind Blenheim's high-tech coffee cup revolution is Reuniverse, which offers a range of reusable food and drink containers. Founder Tony McGurk explains how it works.
This cup has some really neat technology in it. So it has a QR code on the side to give it an identity to you as a consumer, and it has underneath an RFID chip enabled in the cup itself so that we know where the cup is and what it's doing when it gets returned. You'll go into a coffee shop, you'll buy your coffee as you normally would do, and you'll pay a deposit on that cup. So rather than, here's a paper cup, throw it away, you now have a cup that is reusable and rewashable, and you've invested £2 in it, for instance. So if you want your £2 back, you'll make sure it comes back and gets washed and reused.
Do you need a receipt? But revolutions are expensive. Just a few minutes walk away from Blenheim Palace is Smart's fish and chip shop. Owner Ricardo Camara says meeting the new regulations is costing him hundreds.
Plastic bags, cups, lids, boxes, bin liners, other bits and bobs. I'm going to lose easily £600 worth of items.
This is just the latest challenge Ricardo has faced to his livelihood. During COVID, he was forced to close down his restaurant. Now, after a brief time of being back on his feet, once again, he's worried for the future.
I lost big time money around the COVID. Then I decided to take this one over. I take another risk. Now this thing comes along again. Salt and vinegar on the chips?
Yes, please. Ricardo believes he has around 6 months to see if he can stay profitable. And in the meantime, his increased overheads will have to be passed on to his customers.
I cannot take from my own pocket, you know. So whatever I bring it in, I have to increase in the price.
The government says 95% of the public supports the single-use plastic ban, but at a time when many are struggling with the cost of living, its impact could help the environment but damage the high street. Ray Addison, GB News, Woodstock.
It's making us feel very hungry. But from now on, you're maybe even going to have to take your own little Tupperware pot with you for your mushy peas and things like that.
Yeah, maybe. Let's find out anyway, shall we? Andrew Crook is the president of the National Federation of Fish Fryers. Fish Fryers.
Fish fryers.
Oh, easy for me to say. Joins us from Leeds. Good to see you once again, Andrew. What sort of impact will this have?
I think many takeaways have already moved on to compostable packaging. I took the step in my own takeaway about 3 years ago. It has the other effect, it's better for quality, so you don't get condensation. This is a product called bagasse, which is a compostable. It's made from sugarcane, so it does have a carbon footprint because it comes from China. The problem is they look very similar to what's banned, which is the expanded polystyrene. So I think there's still an educational piece from the government for consumers about how to dispose of them correctly.
I mean, a lot of people are getting in touch saying, you know, what about going back to the days when we used to wrap our fish and chips in newspaper? You don't have to go right as far as newspaper. I mean, what's wrong with just wrapping it up in paper?
Yeah, we have white news in shops. The problem is you don't get any portion control, so you can get consumers getting a large portion one time and a small one the next, and you get complaints. And it also doesn't protect the products, and it doesn't travel as well. In this day of deliveries and click and collect, you need something that's robust.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued because, I mean, the one guy we talked to in our report, you know, feels like he's being done out a little bit. Yeah, you've been putting things in place for 3 years or so. Has there been enough warning about this?
I think there has. If you're a member of our association, obviously we update members and they've been aware, but I'm still seeing people on social media groups that haven't been aware of it. We've just set up the Independent Hospitality Alliance, working with all the different cuisines so that we've got a conduit for government to send information out to takeaways out there. It's easy for them to update one of the big chains because they just meet with the head of operations and they get things sorted. But for all the independents, I think there's a need for a way to get information out to operators.
I mean, we will get used to this, won't we?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I say, we've adapted to it. They are a bit more difficult to get out of a stack for the girls serving on the counter. But they do work. But if they don't find their way into a bin and they're just discarded, they'll just act the same as plastic. And a lot of it, even if it ends up in general waste, will either be incinerated to produce electricity or end up in landfill. So there's still a little bit more work to do. And if I'm in Leeds at the moment, I live at the other side of the Pennines, there's different coloured recycling bins from council to council. So it's very confusing. If I'm at my girlfriend's over in Leeds, I don't know which bin to put waste in. But things will settle down and hopefully government will have some joined up thinking and we'll adapt to it.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, that's the issue everyone has with recycling, isn't it? That we just don't know quite where to put it all necessarily or what happens to it.
No,
but
it's different in different places.
It is. We've taken a step in the right direction. I tell you what, Andrew, send us a bag of chips, would you?
It's not fired up yet, but next time you're passing my shop, you can bob in.
Oh, that's a promise. Thank you very much indeed.
I just fancy a bag of chips.
Me too.
Lots of salt and vinegar.
Yep. Tartar sauce. I like tartar sauce.
Do you?
Yeah. See, those are the things that used to come in the little polystyrene cups.
Yeah, but I think that's a bit unnecessary, actually. Like,
yeah, probably is. Just splodge it on.
Splodge it on. Your mushy peas, splodge it on. Bit more of an issue with your curry sauce, mind. But
I think we've got to do what we can to protect our fish and chips as well.
But more than the seas.
I don't mean individually protect. I mean, I just protect fish and chippies.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the one in my village is now closed. Since COVID, it's completely closed down, yeah. And it was famous. People used to come from miles around to our chippy.
Yeah, if you're a regular chippy user, let us know. I haven't had a bag of chips for years.
Oh, you're
years
missing a
and
treat.
years and years.
Why?
Well, because the chippy near me...
Too posh.
No, am I too posh? No. Give over. No, the chippy near me, which I was always going to go to, which looked really nice, and then it changed its name to Fish and Chicken.
Oh,
and that just really doesn't appeal
ruined it
to
for
me.
you.
Yeah.
No, chippy should be a chippy.
Just be a chippy. I don't want fish or chicken. I mean, you can't even spell it right.
No.
So it just put me off. You know. But anyway, maybe that's just me. I should maybe pop my head round. It still smells good when you walk past.
Oh, I bet it does. Have a bag of chips.
Lordy, my grandma and granddad ran a chippy.
Really?
Queen Street Chippy in Dalton. If you're old enough to remember that.
Is it still there at all?
No, it's not. No, it's just a house now.
Oh.
But yeah, so they ran a chippy.
Oh gosh.
So I've got
it's
a very
hard
fondness
work
for
running a
chippies.
chippy because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hot work, and you've got to stay open at those sort of all through the night almost, don't you, to make it work? Because people come out of the pub and want a bag of chips,
Yeah.
don't they?
Oh, yeah.
So you've really got to keep going quite late into the night, and it's very, very hot and sweaty work.
It's a lot of potatoes to peel.
Well, you get a machine to do that now, don't you?
Well, I suppose you can do that. Are they any good, those peelers? These like
Well, actually, you
scrape
don't
it
do
off?
that. In chippies now, you see the great big, huge tubs of already chipped potatoes arrive, don't they? And then hoiking them around. They get through so many. Yeah. It is fascinating watching how a chippy works.
That might be tea tonight. Maybe I'll suggest that when I get home.
Fish and chips.
Fish and chips for tea. That might go down quite well, actually. Anyway, that's another thought. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning. It's been reported that British troops could be sent to Ukraine for the first time since the invasion began. According to the Sunday Telegraph, the Defence Secretary has plans to move a British training programme into the country. It comes following Grant Shapps' visit to Ukraine last week.
A fall in Ofgem's energy price cap has come into effect amid concerns that households could still end up paying around 13% more than they did last winter. The regulator announced in August that the cap on a unit of gas and electricity would reduce the average bill to just under £2,000 for the next 3 months. But some analysts predict the cap will rise again by around 3.5% in January due to increases in wholesale energy prices.
And in the United States, the government there has avoided federal shutdown after both houses approved a temporary funding bill to keep agencies open just for another 45 days, though. The new package drops aid to Ukraine on one hand, but increases federal disaster assistance by $16 billion. The bill funds the government until November the 17th.
Of course, they have had some terrible disasters of their own, haven't they, in the United States recently? A lot of it due to the weather. Shall we find out what the weather's doing for us?
Hello, I'm Marco Petagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far southwest of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the southeast, it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with 1 or 2 showers towards the north and northwest. In the sunshine towards the southeast, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, the mid-70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far southeast should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells towards the north and northwest and a few showers once again toward the far northwest of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down towards the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
I've had a thumbs up for a chippy tea.
Oh, good.
He who must be obeyed has said yes.
OK. Who's frying it? Or do you go to it?
We'll go to a We'll go to fish and chicken.
Chicken.
And we'll try it. Maybe I've been too unfair, but that's the place to go. It's the only one near us. So there you go, chippy tea.
Oh, well done you. You've got something to look forward to.
I'm actually really excited.
That's silly. No, it's not silly, actually. I mean, it's great tea. It is true.
Anyway...
What time will you have that? If it's tea, what time will you eat?
About 6 o'clock.
OK, that is tea then, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, do you want to chat to your favourite stars? Well, you might be able to do so, sort of, weirdly.
By AI?
Yes, it's all very odd, but our favourite oddball futurist, Andrew Reid Paul, will tell us what it's all about.
You called him an oddball.
I know.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 7:32. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Good morning.
It is. Now, we've been talking about it, though we don't quite understand what it's about.
No.
In fact, we've been talking it down without totally understanding what it's about.
Yes.
It's about AI. Have you ever wanted to chat, for instance, to your favourite celebrity? And who would that be? You might be able to do that now, sort of, thanks to Meta Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg. He's enlisted big names in sport and music and fashion to front a new range of AI chatbots on his company's social media apps.
Yeah, so he's getting on board with AI by revealing 28 specialist chatbots based on famous stars. Don't understand. Let's talk to Andrew Eborn, who knows all about these things. Andrew, what is this?
Oh, isn't it glorious? Oh, welcome. It's lovely to see you again. And it was, as I predicted, on this very
Thanks for having us,
table.
Andrew.
Oh, it's very good. It's very good. It's always a thrill. So Mark Zuckerberg, what it is, it's the first in-person conference he's had since the pandemic. And he announced that say it is.
And it seems as though he's always around.
He is always around because he's always there in your face, literally. 28 specialists people, celebrities, will become the voice of these different chatbots. So rather than this automated, robotic-sounding voice, you can have stars such as Kendall Jenner, Snoop Dogg, and Naomi as well, which is fantastic, because she doesn't normally like getting out there in the public. And what we love about this is not just about asking them questions, but it's also about entertainment. So if you can have your favourite celebrity... You were talking about David McCullum earlier.
Yeah.
David McCullum was actually married to my aunt, Jill Ireland, which is...
Oh, yes.
Yes, you see.
Wow.
And she
Your
then
aunt
married...
was Jill Ireland?
Yes, and she then married Charles Bronson afterwards.
That's right. How amazing. Oh, sorry, that was...
No, that's all right.
That's going off on a total tangent.
But you're talking about stars and so on and so forth, and this is what we... At the moment in Hollywood, they've still got the actors' strike going. They've sorted out the writers' strike. Part of that was to do with AI and how that's going to replace so many jobs. The reality is this: if you come to a licensing arrangement, which is what's happened with Zuckerberg and these wonderful celebrities, about using your voice, then you can do that and solve. You can have, I can offer you immortality, is what they're sort of
but
telling
I'm
them to do.
not terribly sure whether that's very nice. I mean, you mentioned David McCullum.
Yes.
Obviously, he wasn't able to record his voice in the way that they're going to use it. But I would still find it very spooky being able to talk to him now.
Well, it's interesting because it depends on what you want to do, because we've looked at this previously in Korea, for example. They've resurrected the dead, haven't they?
Yeah.
So you can go along with your relatives and they can record memories. So it's not just about that, but you can answer questions. What I like, they've announced this week as well, you might remember James Alexander Gordon, JAG, who was the voice of BBC's classified football results for 40 years.
That's right, James Alexander Gordon.
That's right. And it was the way Eric Morecambe, East Fife, 4-4-5. You may remember that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's now been resurrected. So they've used his voice. There's a chap, I've been in touch with him, Tim Huckle, who's done this, and you can go on the website and you can get the results read in
by
Jag's
James
voice.
Alexander Gordon?
Yes, and it's been all his family. Julia, his widow, has approved it all to make that make sense.
Wow.
So it's glorious. Also, I talked about Bruce Willis, so people who can no longer act, and he has aphasia and so on and so forth, he licensed his face and his voice to a Russian telecom company, for which he was paid millions.
He'll do anything for money, won't he? Honestly,
well, someday, there you go. But that's the interesting thing. So if you look at that, if it can give people longevity and a different way of making money, that makes sense.
But isn't it a bit weird, the idea that it's like the movie stars of today could be the movie stars of all time?
Yes, absolutely.
What happens to anybody else?
Well, that's the difficulty.
The new talent.
And, yes, you don't need it. And that's the reality. If you can turn around, and this is what they're arguing about, the big fight at the moment with actors all around the world, if you can record somebody for just one day, and then you've got their name and image in every possible scenario, you'll never need them again. No riders, no problems in the dressing room, no people not turning up.
Well, but you're only talking about their voice, aren't you?
No, not at all. No. It's absolutely... You can take their image, you can replicate it. So Bruce Willis does exactly that. He basically took his whole face. We work in the world of holograms as well, and if you haven't seen it yet, go down and see the Avatar, the ABBA's fantastic show, where you look and feel as though you're really with the artists. And that's what we love about it. This is the future. The future of entertainment is that every possible thing can be replicated.
So if a movie maker at the moment, a director, said, I want Bruce Willis to appear in my next movie, you can actually do that. He's licensed his image, his voice and everything. They could actually create... Would it be convincing?
Oh, no, it's totally convincing. So also, this happened at the moment. So Harrison Ford,
I was going to say, the new Indiana Jones movie's got Harrison Ford as a younger man.
Yeah, so he's in his 70s.
Phenomenal.
He's in his late 70s. They de-aged him to 35 for the first half hour of the movie. And they can do all of that now. The great thing is, if I want to wake up to Anne Diamond every morning, which of course we do together with Stephen, I can do that. We can... All the footage is already recorded.
I could be at home in bed asleep.
Yes.
But still also presenting this programme.
And earning money. Now, how appetising is that? There's no 3:30 alarm call. We were talking about the morning show. Wouldn't that be glorious? And you can do that. You can replicate with existing footage.
I can begin to see the danger, though, as well, from others saying...
I can see the appeal if you're the person involved, but the danger for anybody else.
Well, and that's the worrying thing. We talk about identity theft at the moment, and people, you think you get an email. Now you can get somebody's voice phoning. So if your child or friend or your parents or whatever phone you up and say, I'm in trouble, I'm on different things, and they can even do an image, so you can have these fake videos.
So how do we protect ourselves against that?
Well, consult us is the reality, because so often, this is why we're talking about the threats of AI. And we're going to have an AI summit at Bletchley Park at the beginning of November. Rishi Sunak has invited all the world leaders, some of them are coming. But the reality is that we need to look at at how we can identify this sort of stuff. We're living in a diseased information age at the moment, and it's going to get worse.
So it's in effect deep fake, as it's known, will become almost the normality.
Oh, absolutely. And you remember the Pope in a puffer with that sort of stuff. But you also have Zelensky, who was surrendering to Putin in a video. All this sort of... You have Trump saying all sorts of extraordinary things. That was true. But you can have this. And so the question, you have to question everything.
I think we've got a clip, actually, haven't we?
Oh, it's just the football scores.
It's just the football scores.
Oh, it's rather fun. Here we are. The wonderful James Alexander-Gordon. Listen to this voice.
Premier League. Aston Villa 6, Brighton and Hove Albion 1. Bournemouth 0, Arsenal 4. Everton 1, Luton Town 2. Manchester United 0, Crystal Palace 1. Newcastle United
in a way,
2.
Andrew, that's quite an easy thing to
that one's a bit easy.
But it's still, I mean, it's a voice from the past.
Well, and that's what happens. The nostalgia ain't what it used to be. Tim Huckle was what he did. He went to, and I've been in touch with him very recently. He emailed me because I was checking out rights and licensing, because obviously he needs to make sure that's in place, because the BBC have the original footage. Used to go out for 40 years every time, 5 o'clock on Saturday. And it was Eric Morecambe, as I say, which it was every time he used to meet, they were chums for about 20 years, and he would never greet him by name. He would always say East 5-4, 4-5, because he thought that was the best tongue twister ever. And you're talking about your wonderful Federation of Fish Fryers and your fabulous Back to the Futurists. I love all this sort of alliteration. It's got to be...
There was always the famous story, wasn't there, of the when you have to read out the football results, which you used to have to do every afternoon.
Yes.
Somebody started off saying League Division 1, Arsenal 3. You know, blah, blah, blah.
No.
Oh, they got to the end of the whole thing and they had one left over.
Oh, no.
What I also like, the Scottish League Cup, if you've got time, there was a tie in July 2018 when that magical score, it was 1-1, but it went to penalties and they managed to get that glorious score of East 5-4, 4-5. They did. And that happened on July 2018. Aidan will tell you all about it.
Aidan will know all about it.
Yes,
He's here as well. Yeah, it's one of those facts I'll bet you all have always had in the back of your head.
Yeah, that is the famous scoreline. That is. James Alexander-Gordon was a true legend. In fact, so one of the radio stations he was working at stopped doing the classified check altogether, and then another rival station seized a commercial opportunity to start doing it themselves.
Because people used to look forward to his
They
voice.
did, yeah. You could tell if it was a draw as well, because it was Arsenal 1, Tottenham 1.
Yes, absolutely. He always had that wave in his voice, didn't he?
Well, it was Tottenham 2, Liverpool 1.
It was, but not without controversy, though. I mean, Liverpool could have gone top with a victory, but this was a VAR fiasco like none that we've seen before. I mean, this has been our 5th season now of having VAR. Now, Liverpool took the lead on they thought they took the lead in the 34th minute. The lines on the pitch showed that the Liverpool player was clearly onside by a yard, Stephen. A clear yard. Now, if the on-field officials don't see that, the point of VAR is that you iron out that problem. If you're transferring human error into the technology box, where human error is meant to be eliminated, and still they can't get the right result or the right decision, then you've got serious problems here, and you're going to have to look at it again. The PGMOL, who are the company who appoint the officials, had to issue another apology yesterday to the Liverpool manager, saying this was a clear loss of concentration, this was a acknowledgement of significant human error. Now, that's a fiasco to me. Some decisions are marginal. This one wasn't even close. Lo and behold, Tottenham 2 minutes later go and score a goal. Liverpool have 2 men sent off. They equalise, then Tottenham score in the 6th minute of added time with an own goal. Amazingly, Jurgen Klopp was quite conciliatory and quite diplomatic after the game, despite having every right to be incandescent with rage. And, you know, he said, look, I feel sorry for the guys who made the mistake, which was quite a nice thing to say, considering that lots of managers would have hit the roof.
Talking about making mistakes, it's easy to make typos, but it confuses us when we don't know about sport. Because it says in my notes here, Luton Town claimed a first historic Premier League victory, and it also says Luton 1, Everton 2. So what's the...
we didn't get both.
How does that work?
Well, we didn't get two matches on the same day, I can assure you of that. But Luton Town did get a first win in their Premier League history. They haven't won this first top-flight match they've won since 1992, because they had an absence, of course, of 31 years. But they went to Everton, won 2-1, so brilliant for them. Manchester United and Manchester City lost on the same day at 3 o'clock simultaneously for the first time in 10 years. So Man City lost at Wolves. That's the second time they've lost since January. Man United...
Crystal Palace, was it?
They lost at home to Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace lost there on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup. They went back there and won 1-0. Roy Hodgson, his 5th consecutive trip to Manchester United where he has avoided defeat and turmoil for Manchester United. This is their worst start to a season since 1989, 34 years ago, when Cumbrian businessman Michael Knighton nearly bought the club for £5 million. That's as far back as we're going here.
I wish he had.
Oh, yeah, he's been on record many times. He bought Carlisle United in the end.
Well, not quite the same, is it?
Not quite the same, no, exactly.
God love them.
Exactly.
Aidan, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Absolutely. Good. Right.
Now, coming up, a new poll shows a third of Tory voters plan to switch parties. Now, that'd be a nightmare for the Prime Minister, won't it, at the start of conference? We'll talk about it in Headline Makers. That's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 7:47. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio, of course, DAB Plus as well, online, so you can watch us wherever you are. Kimberly has been in touch. She's watching us in Riyadh this morning.
Oh,
Good
wow.
morning to you.
And Gillian says, my heartthrob was Steve McQueen. How could we forget Steve McQueen? He was gorgeous. We're talking about heartthrobs. Got lots of ideas for you a bit later on.
Let's bring you up to date with some of the newspapers this morning. Mail on Sunday has Suella Braverman hitting back at Sir Elton John because he criticised the government's handling of migration.
The Observer leading with a story that the Education Secretary has kept secret files on people who are critical of their policies.
Independent has Tories heading for a wipeout at the next election, according to a new poll.
Oh, they'll love reading that this morning. The Sunday Telegraph leads with the Defence Secretary's comments that British troops are going to be sent to Ukraine to help train their troops.
And Daily Star Sunday, oh dear me, is talking about an England star who got a bit romantic with someone but left his socks on. As if we care. Why
That
not?
is a real front page lead, isn't it?
Well, they might have had cold feet. Let's Tom, because we've got Nabila Ramdani and Tom Slater with us this morning. Good to see you both. Tom, let's have a look at the vaping industry, should we?
Yes, so this is their message to the government on the verge of this policy coming in to ban single-use vapes, just making the point that whilst there is obviously a distinction between the single-use ones, which is what is going to be banned here, there's often brightly coloured elf bars, as they're often called, which the concern is that young people are buying them, and obviously you can get ones which you refill and so on. But they're making the point that single-use vapes and vaping in general has been so useful for people quitting smoking. I mean, the NHS, which is quite conservative on these matters, but still has suggested that vaping is like north of 95% safer. And I'm sure most people have this experience. Anyone who they know who's quit smoking, it's more often than not it's because they've switched to vaping or used that as a kind of bridge to stop. So it's just the unintended consequences of these things. And I get that there's concerns around littering, but, you know, you could... all sorts of things... You know, I'm against littering, but all sorts of things could be dropped on the ground. And it's just... Again, there has been this move in various countries to clamp down on vaping. I just find it such a strange obsession, given the fact that as smoking cessation tools go, it's the best we've ever come up with, and yet the tendency is always towards clamping down on these things.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, trying to deter children from smoking is always a good idea, especially since these vaping devices come in different flavouring. They're apple-flavoured, strawberry-flavoured.
Well, can't adults enjoy a different flavour?
It's like tobacco-flavoured vape, if anyone's ever had it, it's horrible. So I think that's one of the things where...
That's interesting, isn't it?
Because no one, when people actually switch to vaping, they don't really necessarily work, because you can't, it just doesn't necessarily do the business. But I agree, this is an issue, primarily people are concerned about teenagers. One thing I would say is they're not moving on to smoking, so that, you know, you can kind of count your lucky blessings. But at the same time, of course, you know, you don't want kids hooked on nicotine. But I think that's just a case for making sure that you clamp down on shots when they sell it to kids, rather than, you know, making it a across-the-board thing. Because even with the flavours and colours and so on, that is as much to appeal to adults, as it turns out, as it is.
What's the official age limit on a vape now?
It's 18, isn't
It is 18.
Yeah, same as smoking.
But aren't they more loaded in nicotine than actual cigarettes?
No.
Not necessarily.
But it's a
can be.
way to get you hooked anyway. But you're saying studies show that they do not necessarily transition to...
Yeah, there's no gateway effect, it looks like, with kids, because smoking amongst kids has fallen off a cliff, it looks like. They're just not doing it.
And that has to be good, yeah.
Well, it used to be glamorous to hold a cigarette.
Yes, I don't know whether the glamour isn't there with it.
Yeah, I don't see it at all, It looks like you could have got a toy hanging out of your mouth.
Yeah, weird.
Nabila, can we have a look at the Sunday Express and this lifeline, we're being told, for some high streets coming from the Prime Minister?
Oh, yes. So let me get the Sunday Express.
It's £1 billion he's going to pour into our high streets.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is a classic, in my view, pre-conference headline in traditionally conservative supporting newspapers. I mean, this is very interesting because, you know, high streets are in a terrible state across the country, and effectively the Prime Minister is pledging to pour £1 billion to revitalise those high street shops, not least of all because they face a massive threat from online retailers such as Amazon, for example. And it's also aimed at you know, revitalising communities, not just the shops, but the communities revolving around those shops.
Is there any suggestion as to what they're actually going to spend the money on?
No, but...
How will you revitalise high streets just with money? It's more than that,
precisely, but I think this headline makes it clear that Sunak's focus for the conference is going to be firmly on economics. And... You know, his party is clearly in a bad way at the moment. They, you know, on average of 18 points behind Labour in the polls. But I think Sunak still believes that there's still a mistrust around Labour surrounding economics. And he still has a chance to win the next general election because of that mistrust that, you know, Labour are incompetent with numbers and incompetent with budget. And that's why he's going for it.
Well, I mean, it's got to be worth a shot from a political perspective, Tom.
Well, it's a narrow path to victory, but it's definitely there if he wants to take it, not least because things are so volatile at the moment. Like, you can see people's prospects in the polls rise and fall quite quickly. But he's in a strange position at the moment where his whole pitch, whether it's on some of the motorist stuff, whether it's on net zero, is essentially opposing policies that previous Conservative governments have brought in.
Yeah.
And that's a hard argument to land with the public sometimes.
Yeah, but they're clear crowd pleasers.
That's very true. And there's also he's making a distinction between himself and Labour, who very naturally want to stand by these kinds of policies, even if they kind of stare at their shoelaces when people say, would you keep it? That if you became...
Especially so since general elections tend to be general rejections. So he's got to come up with a firm economic plan to, you know, I mean, to counter some of the cheeky...
Well, we're out of time, Villa. I hate to say it. But we shall catch up with you both a little bit later on. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get a quick check on the weather.
Hello, I'm Marco Patenia. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far southwest of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the southeast it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with one or two showers towards the north and northwest. In the sunshine towards the southeast, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, the mid-70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far southeast should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells towards the north and northwest and a few showers once again toward the far northwest of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down towards the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
Just looking around, chips.
You've got so many fish and chip shops around here.
No, there's loads of fish and chip shops around where I live, and 3 of them are tagged as the best chip shop locally. So,
well, they have to be good then.
So we can't go wrong tonight, can we?
How will you choose?
So excited. Anyway, I'll tell you about the chips coming up and the latest from...
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst. And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News. From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world. Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too. If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online. Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning to you, it's 8 o'clock, Sunday the 1st of October. Today, Conservative Party conference kicks off in Manchester and we're there throughout the next 4 days, bringing you every little detail.
Yes, it's Rishi Sunak's first conference as Prime Minister, but could it be his last? He's hugely behind in the polls and there's lots of rivals who want his job.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today, but businesses say they're not prepared, and ready meals and vapes are exempt.
Also coming into force today, the Windsor framework replacing the Northern Ireland Protocol. Unionists say it's just a border in the Irish Sea.
Day one of Rishi's deal. Is it business superhighways or green and red lanes with political potholes in it?
And Marco has your latest weather forecast.
Hello, good morning. We've got a mixed bag of weather in store across the UK through the day today. There'll be some rain in some areas, sunshine elsewhere, but I'll have all the details later on.
Also coming up for you, Aidan's got the sport.
Yes, indeed. In the Rugby World Cup, Scotland keep their hopes of glory alive with a crushing win over Romania in Lille. And in the Premier League, it was double misery for both Manchester clubs.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Heartthrobs.
Heartthrobs, yes. Is the era of the heartthrob over? And who was your poster on your bedroom wall?
You never know. Maybe at the start of Tory party conference, maybe Rishi Sunak is somebody's heartthrob.
OK.
Possibly. Possibly.
Stephen says, mine was Alexandra Bastido. Do you remember her?
No.
She was from the Champions.
Before my time.
I had a poster of her in my bedroom wearing a bikini. She is an absolutely beautiful woman. I interviewed Alexandra Bastido and she was fantastic. Very poised.
David said mine was way back in the 60s when I was at boarding school. A very young, I presume it's a bit of a type. I presume it's Helen Shapiro.
It's Helen Shapiro, yeah. And I interviewed Helen Shapiro as well. She was wonderful.
What was her song? The big one.
Walking back to happiness.
Yeah.
Whoop-a, oh, yeah.
Oh, you've got the voice of an angel. I've heard this a lot. Terry says, I was so in love with John Taylor of Duran Duran.
With the hair.
I never was into Duran Duran at all, so I can't really picture John Taylor, but I've heard loads of people
Oh no,
say
he had
really lovely.
he had the lovely. Well, I mean, everybody in the 70s had that sort of hair, didn't they?
Anyway,
So,
she
80s,
was
really.
every time he was in the paper getting papped with a new girlfriend, I'd be so jealous.
Yeah. Gillian says, my heartthrob was Steve McQueen. The poster I had and still have was of him in the film Le Mans, the 24-hour road race, where I believe he did most of his own stunts. Yeah, Steve McQueen was very proud of always doing his own stunts, even when he was in the Great Escape, wasn't he?
Was he?
He was the one on the motorbike. Oh, yeah.
John's wife of 61 years has got varying tastes because her heartthrobs that she's had pictures of, Dirk Bogarde, right? Johnny Cash, so going down a few years, and Roger Federer.
True,
There
Roger
you go.
Federer is a heartthrob still, isn't he?
In 1958, John says, I found a very large picture of Dirk in her wardrobe and ripped it, and I'm still in the bad books.
He was beautiful. Absolutely.
55 years
Beautiful
later.
man. But you see, most of those are old. I mean, that's why I've been asking you who you had on your bedroom wall. Most of those are old stars, and you just do wonder. One of the columnists in the Sunday papers today says, is the age of the heartthrob over? Do we not have anyone like that anymore? Jill says, my dad heard me talk about ABBA, but I was joking. But he sent off for a poster for me, and I didn't have the heart to say I had been joking when I said how much I admired them. They are great, though, I know.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Legendary ABBA. Love ABBA. Anyway, keep your ideas of heartthrobs, and if you've got any posters, send us pictures. If you're a youngster with your bedroom covered in them. Let's see, you probably haven't got a picture of Rishi Sunak on your wall, but you never know. It is the first day of Tory party conference, and Mr Sunak already vowing to set out his vision for the country without taking easy choices.
As he arrived for the four-day event in Manchester, he announced that he's going to invest more than £1 billion worth of cash into high streets in towns because he says they've been overlooked.
But the conference is not going to be plain sailing, let's be honest. The PM expected to face pressure from within his own party over things like net zero, immigration and HS2.
So there could be some fireworks this week. Let's find out what. Our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is in Manchester. Morning, Catherine. Glad to see you've been able to take the umbrella down. How good a weather forecast is it really, politically, for Rishi Sunak?
Not great, I have to say. Talking about heartthrobs, a couple of years ago, some people dubbed him Dishy Rishi. That is when he was Chancellor, when he was keeping millions of people afloat with the furlough scheme, doling out the cash. But of course, he's not so popular now that he is Prime Minister, and particularly not here in Manchester, a city never particularly keen on the Conservatives at the best of times. There's going to be protests later. There's a very heavy police presence here and armed police too. And, of course, the rumour that it seems extremely likely that the government are going to axe the HS2 part of the line from Birmingham through to Manchester. So not much love for Rishi Sunak outside the walls of conference. But he has, over the last couple of weeks, been much bolder. We've heard so much about the 5 pledges. They're not going terribly well. But over the last week or two, he's rode back on some green targets. He's come out yesterday and say that Conservatives are on the side of the motorist. That's, of course, influenced by the fact that they unexpectedly held on to Uxbridge, largely because of opposition to the ultra-low emission zone. Today, we hear that they're announcing more money for towns to help level up our high streets. Levelling up is something that we don't hear as much about as we did under Boris Johnson. But certainly, I think he will take some comfort from the fact that a poll out today puts the lead of Labour's lead at just 10 points. Now, I say just, and it's only one poll, but for about a year, the polls have had Labour 20 points ahead. So Rishi Sunak, I think, will take some comfort from that. But meanwhile, He's trying to keep a lid on all the factions in his own party, and there's plenty of Conservatives who frankly think that the next election is already lost, and they are jostling to put themselves in the best possible position for a leadership election. So we've heard a lot from the Home Secretary in the last week talking about the ECHR. Today there's an interview with Kemi Badenoch, who we know would also rather like to lead the Conservative Party. And Liz Truss, yes, remember her. This time last year the government was imploding because of her unfunded tax cuts. This year 30 Conservatives are writing to Rishi Sunak saying that there must be no tax rises. But Liz Truss is giving a big speech tomorrow on growth. So lots of rivals circling, and a tricky few days ahead for the Prime Minister.
OK, Catherine, thank you. Let's have a view from the Labour side then, and former political secretary to Tony Blair, John McTernan. Good to see you, John, as always. I mean, how tricky do you think this is going to be?
So, the conference week is always a great week for a party because their stories and what's going on at conference dominates the news. And when you're on the up, you're united, you're confident, you're brimming with energy and ideas. And when you're on the way down, you have stories about infighting. You have commentators chuckling slightly when they report, as we just got in that recent piece. People going, you see the reality of briefing in the Sunday papers by a bunch of people positioning themselves not to support the Prime Minister, but to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And the infighting, which is coming out in lots of the reports this morning on TV, radio, and the papers, that's going to be coming out more and more during the week, because what happens when you bring a political party together is you get all the politicians in one place, all the journalists in one place, and you get people gossiping and drinking and gossiping. And so I think if you're indisciplined, conference magnifies it. If you're disciplined, conference magnifies it. So I think this is going to be a rocky week for Rishi, and he is a long way, absolutely, from being the Rishi Dishy of yore. He's a relaunch Rishi, and you should always fear being a politician. If someone says to you, boss, we want to do a relaunch, because I've never come across a political relaunch that's ever worked. It actually shows that you're weak and you're falling. And the question is, what's the message of this week? And we know hanging over the week is the cancellation of HS2. So going to Manchester to threaten the cancellation of a major rail project seems to be not really great messaging. And that's what we've got to look for. What's the big themes and what's the little themes? What are the behaviours?
Yeah, isn't it fascinating as well, though, because, I mean, this is one election they really, really want to win, and yet they are looking so divided. It's the one time they need to look really, really united, and I doubt he can do that in the next 4 days.
No, I think that's right. I think we all know it from our own lives. The best discipline is self-discipline. It's impossible to make a party be disciplined. The party's got to want to be disciplined. And you'll see when Labour come next week, the sense of what happens when you feel on the up, when you're optimistic. This is what you're seeing in this week, I think, in Manchester. Is going to be a party that's as impossible to discipline as cats are to herd.
Yeah, fair point. I'll tell you what, though, which may well work in their favour is there's not a lot of love for the Labour Party, is there? I mean, there are clear dividing lines emerging, and the government's pushing that, but there's no real love for Keir Starmer, and he keeps making these blunders, doesn't he? I mean, it was all this business about we don't want to deviate from the EU that he said a couple of weeks ago was in response to a question you asked him.
Exactly. And what he actually said, I think, is utterly uncontroversial. Labour will not weaken labour standards. Labour will not weaken food standards. Labour will not weaken environmental standards. Now, the Tory party made an incredible fuss about that, the Central Office operation. I don't think there is a group of voters out there who go shouting, what do we want? We want lower standards at work, lower standards of our food, and lower environmental standards. I think in contrast, you see the controversy around pumping sewage into the sea, pumping sewage into our rivers. That's been really bad for the government image. And kind of at the moment, there's a huge contest about what do you choose? What's the best image? of a government that's run into the buffers. Is it HS2 being cancelled? Is it sewage in the sea, in the rivers? Or is it, the concrete, the crumbling concrete that's making schools unsafe to be in? There's so many images of decay and neglect about our country that are the responsibility of Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party. And is Keir popular or unpopular? Is he doing his job? Well, he's on his third Prime Minister. There's never been a Labour leader in opposition who's seen off two Prime Ministers and is in a substantial poll lead over the third Prime Minister facing him. So I think he's doing something right. And I'd say, having had the turmoil of Truss, having had Partygate and all the breaking of the rules by Boris Johnson the Joker, now with Rishi and Keir, you've got a choice between two men who are offering plans for the future, but Rishi can't fix the current day problems. He can't deliver his 5 pledges, so he's trying to change the conversation. Whereas I think at conference next week, you'll see Keir unveil the 4 or 5 pledges he wants to campaign on in a very voter-friendly way. There's lots of policy. They've now got to sell it.
Really? Keir Starmer's pledges next. I would advise against anyone making pledges at the moment. John, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Yes, all eyes may be on the Tory party conference at the moment, but I think the really interesting one is going to be the Labour Party conference, because we are going to want to hear what those pledges may be.
Yeah, it seems crazy, pledges. I mean, I'll tell you what I found interesting with John there, saying, there's, Rishi Sunak maybe trying to get on with it, but he can't solve these problems. No, that's a fair assessment. But can Keir Starmer? Because he's not said how he's going to solve any of these problems.
And he won't want to say it.
And
anyway.
he won't want to say it, no.
So will it be a limp conference from their point of view? I don't know.
I'll tell you what worries me about this whole election is there's a lot of dissatisfied Tories and there are a lot of people who aren't inspired by Labour.
And a lot of people, voters, potential voters anyway, are just fed up with the whole mess.
So does that mean we're going to have a really low turnout? Which I think is terrible for democracy if there's a low turnout, because you want the majority of people saying who should run the country, not just a minority.
I don't know, a lot can change. Maybe we'll feel differently in 6 months' time.
We need to get more excited about politics. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, they're not giving a lot for us to be very excited about, though.
No, they're not. I know. We're going to be talking to some youth panels in the coming weeks in the run-up to all of this, which I think might be quite interesting to get that youth. I know sometimes it can be a bit irritating if you're of the older generation. What do they know? But actually, they're the next generation.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Aren't they? So you've got to have that injection of youth and see what they want as well as what everybody else
and
wants.
They do care. They really do. Be interesting to see whether they are disillusioned with our present-day politicians or whether they actually do see some way forward.
Well, one thing that the government is doing is, from today, businesses in England are being banned from selling single-use plastic cutlery, polystyrene, food containers. It's all part of plans to reduce litter, but actually protect the environment, because it's a huge problem for the oceans, actually.
For us all.
But of course, it comes at a price, and that price is business owners who are struggling already.
Well, our reporter Ray Addison went to Woodstock in Oxfordshire to find out how 2 very different businesses are dealing with the change.
Dirty streets and polluted waterways. That's the legacy of single-use plastics. However, from today, the government is forcing most business owners to go green or face tough fines. At the more than 300-year-old Blenheim Palace in Woodstock, they're replacing 500,000 single-use coffee cups with 17,000 that can be washed and returned, saving 35 tonnes of CO2. David Green is head of innovation.
We serve over 400,000 hot drinks at Blenheim, and many of those cups, even though they're compostable, can only be composted up to about 5% with food waste. So actually eradicating single-use cups really does fit into our overall strategy of becoming carbon neutral by 2027.
The company behind Blenheim's high-tech coffee cup revolution is Reuniverse, which offers a range of reusable food and drink containers. Founder Tony McGurk explains how it works.
This cup has some really neat technology in it. So it has a QR code on the side to give it an identity to you as a consumer, and it has underneath an RFID chip enabled in the cup itself, so that we know where the cup is and what it's doing when it gets returned. You'll go into a coffee shop, you'll buy your coffee as you normally would do, and you'll pay a deposit on that cup. So rather than, here's a paper cup, throw it away, you now have a cup that is reusable and rewashable, and you've invested £2 in it, for instance. So if you want your £2 back, you'll make sure it comes back and gets washed and reused.
Give me the receipt.
But revolutions are expensive. Just a few minutes walk away from Blenheim Palace is Smart's fish and chip shop. Owner Ricardo Camara says meeting the new regulations is costing him hundreds.
Plastic bags, cups, lids, boxes, bin liners, other bits and bobs. I'm going to lose easily £600 worth of items.
This is just the latest challenge Ricardo has faced to his livelihood. During COVID, he was forced to close down his restaurant. Now, after a brief time of being back on his feet, once again, he's worried for the future.
I lost big time money around the COVID. Then I decided to take this one over. I take another risk. Now this thing comes along again. Salt and vinegar on the chips?
Yes, please. Ricardo believes he has around 6 months to see if he can stay profitable. And in the meantime, his increased overheads will have to be passed on to his customers.
I cannot take from my own pocket, you know. So whatever I bring it in, I have to increase in the price.
The government says 95% of the public supports the single-use plastic ban, but at a time when many are struggling with the cost of living, its impact could help the environment but damage the high street. Ray Addison, GB News, Woodstock.
Well, earlier we spoke to the president of the National Federation of Fish Fryers, Andrew Cook.
I think many takeaways have already moved on to compostable packaging. I took the step in my own takeaway about 3 years ago. It has the other effect, it's better for quality, so you don't get condensation. This is a product called bagasse, which is a compostable. It's made from sugarcane, so it does have a carbon footprint because it comes from China. The problem is they look very similar to what's banned, which is the expanded polystyrene. So I think there's still an educational piece from the government for consumers about how to dispose of them correctly.
You don't have to go right as far as newspaper. I mean, what's wrong with just wrapping it up in paper?
Yeah, we have white news in shops. The problem is you don't get any portion control, so you can get consumers getting a large portion one time and a small one the next, and you get complaints. And it also doesn't protect the products, and it doesn't travel as well. In this day of deliveries and click and collect, you need something that's robust.
See, that's the problem.
Fish and chips.
Yeah, but isn't that the problem? It's all about Deliveroo and Just Eat and all these sort of things. Where Uber do it now, don't they? Where you pick up your food and...
Well, they do in certain parts of the world, not anywhere near where I live.
No,
I presume you do. You get things delivered by little robots on wheels.
Oh, yeah, but that's just from the co-op.
Oh, I see.
It's not quite as exciting as... Yeah.
So you'll have to drive out and get your fish and chip supper tonight.
Yeah. I may take a newspaper with me so we can wrap it up in newspaper and feel like the good old days.
They probably wouldn't let you do that.
No, probably not. I'm not having it in a box, though. Tell you that for nothing. It better be wrapped in paper.
Might not be. It might be in one of those fancy boxes made of bamboo or whatever.
No, it's not the same.
No, it won't.
You want a little wooden fork. See, that's the other thing.
Yeah, little wooden forks that were completely impractical.
Totally useless.
You know, but they were fun.
Yeah, we didn't have any plastic back then, did we?
But I was on a plane just last week and all of the cutlery is bamboo now.
Oh, is it? Oh, well, there you go.
So they're doing their bit.
There you go.
If we all do our bit, that's the point. All of these industries do their bit. At least it will reduce the plastic, particularly in the sea.
Yeah, because whether you...
Microplastics, I mean, we're all full of them.
Microplastics. And there are places... There are places is it in the middle of the Atlantic, and it's actually a massive island.
Islands made of plastic.
Where it all is just congregated together.
Stuck together.
It is awful. We have got to sort it out. It's crackers. Crackers.
So much to sort out.
Talking of seas, the new Windsor framework... that comes into force today, and effectively it means, and this is the problem, that there is a border down the middle of the Irish Sea, in effect.
You can't really get your head around, can you?
No.
It's the post-Brexit legal agreement, the Windsor framework, intended to continue open trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic, whilst reducing friction on trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain.
So it puts in new arrangements, including red and green lanes, with the aim of reducing checks on goods, food in particular, heading into Northern Ireland from Great Britain.
Let's go to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, who will be able to explain it all for us. Good morning, Doogie.
Good morning, and if only I could explain it all. My dining room table is absolutely covered in so much legislation and documents concerning this, and the only reason that I've actually got to get my head round it was that I spent so much time with agriculture, and all trade deals start right there. They start with the movement of food and the movement of energy, and if you take it to its basic level, food is either on 4 hooves or on 2 wings, and that moves in and out of different countries. And there has now been a border put down the Irish Sea, because the only part of the UK that has a border with the EU, a land border, of course, is Northern Ireland, and that's with the Republic of Ireland. So what they've tried to do is to protect the EU's single market at the same time as leaving Northern Ireland to be able to trade with its biggest trading partner, the other part of the UK. Now, that has been quite a tricky thing to do. We've had the backstop, we've had the protocol, and now we have the framework document, which are all basically the same deal with tinkering around the edges. Even the sea border isn't really a sea border. The port of Belfast, where I'm in now, is actually the border itself, because goods are checked coming in and out of here, and today those green and red lanes will come into operation. But we have to be very careful around how we word this. This is a phasing in of the framework document. It's not the full framework document. It's not full fat framework. So this is the retail side. This is a side where goods coming across from Great Britain, Europe will already have a manifest of what was on those lorries coming in, and it will allow supermarkets in Northern Ireland to get most of the goods that it already had. In other words, bring it back to where it was before Brexit. And that will start to ease things here in Northern Ireland for the next few weeks. But where we have to be careful here, of course, is that people will say, well, that's okay, the framework, it wasn't as bad as all that. What was all the problems about in the first place? Because, of course, the unionists have collapsed the government here and are refusing to go back in, because they say they have no control over those legislative laws that are being made in Europe, and of course there's no MEPs here. So what will the real battleground on this will come basically in the new year, in January and next October, because customs legislation has to be fought over and looked at to find out exactly who's going to win and who's going to lose when goods from Ireland are travelling back to the UK, because that enforcement hasn't come into place yet, and that may cause real problems for the Irish economy and Northern Irish's economy in the next year.
Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, we'll send exam questions on that later on.
It's very complicated. They're going to get worse in the new year, but do keep us across all of that. In the meantime, let's see what's happening. Oh, we haven't got the weather, so instead we'll tell you what's coming up in just a moment, which is all the sport with Aidan McGee.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, you're poised with some views, Anne.
I am. I haven't had time to read them.
Oh, OK. I just thought you wanted to throw some in. But anyway, in the meantime, let's talk with the creme de la creme of sports broadcasters, Aidan McGee, who's here, because let's talk Rugby World Cup, which is meant to be the best of the best, right?
Creme de la creme.
Well, the creme de la creme. And yet, no offence to Scotland, but beating Romania 84-0, either Scotland's unbelievably fantastic or Romania just isn't that good.
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, Scotland are not a bad side. I mean, they'll fancy their chances of beating Ireland next week. Well, I don't know if they'll fancy their chances, but beating Ireland next week would take them into the knockout phase. But 84-0 against Romania. Now, the World Cup is meant to represent the elite of any sport. That's just what it's there for. Yeah, that's what you have qualifying for. And yet you've got countries like Namibia, Romania, Chile, Tonga, Samoa just kind of rolling over in some of their matches. So 84-0 yesterday. Chile lost 71-0 to England last week. The way it's set up now, Stephen, dilutes the competition. The other problem is that it started on September the 8th. It finishes on October the 28th. It's almost like the Rugby World Cup season, never mind the Rugby World Cup tournament. When England play next week, it will have been 2 weeks since they last played. Now, if you look at the Football World Cup, for example, you get momentum. England play on a Wednesday, win, lose or draw, you know they're probably going to be in action 3 years. You may have talking about the Rugby World Cup 3 or 4 days later. And so I look at ITV's peak audience last night. They showed this game, Scotland against Romania. It wasn't much of a contest. What are the viewers getting out of this? It's a peak time scheduling, and they're seeing these squash matches. It's almost like going to watch the wrestling in Blackpool in the 80s and seeing a set-up match where someone's paid to lose almost. But something's got to be done about it, because, I mean, there's 20 teams. Quite frankly, 2/3 of them are there to make up the numbers. Half a dozen or so, including England, Ireland, France, New Zealand, South Africa, are there on business to win the World Cup. And when you have a weak Australia as well, who are normally very strong, very powerful as well, it makes for a poor tournament. It's too long, there's too many gaps between it, and it's taking up prime television time as well, when it should be used for something better, in my view.
If it's not interesting, it'll lose fans and it'll lose television money.
Well, it will, but also I look in the papers this morning, and this is the Rugby World Cup. England have won this thing. Ireland have got a good chance of winning it this time. The home nations are all quite strong. Not much mention of it. Outside the broadsheets, where you'd normally expect the rugby union to be covered, there's not much mention of it elsewhere. And I think this is just playing out, just limping week to week to week. No one's really talking about it. When England won it in 2003, the pubs around South London were absolutely
wild.
Everywhere. And everywhere.
Wild.
So, yeah, I just think it needs a bit of oomph from somewhere. And, England are playing, I think it's Samoa next week. I mean, England are already through, so that's kind of a dead rubber as well. Scotland-Ireland will be the big game. But look, let's say Scotland did do their job. They ran in the tries, they got the bonus points, and Darcy Graham scored 4 tries, but that's about as interesting as it gets.
Right. Now, it almost sounds like a it's a sort of Manchester United derby. Manchester derby, I should say, yesterday, weirdly, in that Man United and Man City both played separately, both lost.
At the
same time.
For the first time in 10 years, they both kicked off simultaneously at 3 o'clock on a Saturday and lost. That's the standards that those two clubs, particularly Man City, obviously, in the last 10 years, have set in that time. But yes, United was more troubling. I mean, 4th defeat out of 7 matches. That's their worst start to a season since 1989, since the very year that the Cumbrian businessman Michael Knighton tried to buy them. He almost got them. He was that close to getting them for £5 million. He came on the pitch on the opening day of the season against Arsenal and doing keepy-uppies. And I remember Alex Ferguson writing his book. He was with George Graham, the Arsenal manager, in the office, and he had a little TV up in the corner of his room thinking, who the hell's this bloke? I quite like his skills. He wasn't good enough to play football. He wasn't quite enough to get the deal over the line.
But
that's how long
we're
talking. And, how long before pressure builds around a manager? Their fans, because they see Alex Ferguson 30-odd years ago, 36 years ago, coming into the job, having a miserable first few years, they think that probably this, in this era, maybe that happens again. I think we've entered the era where any manager is only about 6 games away from the sack. And if you look at his opposite number, Roy Hodgson, for example, who is 76, recovered from illness 2 weeks ago, goes to Old Trafford and records another victory there. That's outstanding from him. And Manchester City, big story there as well, losing only their 2nd game since January, the treble winners, of course, going to Wolves, who were struggling, and losing by 2-1. So an entertaining day of football yesterday, and it gives hope as well that not everything's a read-through, not everything goes as expected. Well, it's not quite as diluted as the Rugby World Cup, I have to say.
No, well, that's good.
Premier League shorter.
You've got to know what's going on. Meanwhile, a little bit of history for Luton yesterday.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's the first top-flight win since 1992. They'd never competed in the Premier League, and they fell out of the top division at just the wrong time in 1992 when the money came into it. But they went to Everton yesterday, 2-0 up in the first half. Fair props to them. They've played well this season so far, haven't got the points, but luckily they got a win yesterday.
Well,
so who knows, they might have
that.
lift off to the rest of their season.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Crossed for them. It's nice to see the underdogs do well.
Oh, absolutely.
Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you both.
Thank you, and it's our headline makers. Next, you're watching GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Talking about the ban of single-use plastics comes into force today. Paul's raised a very valid point, actually. He says, whilst I applaud the idea, the NHS has probably the largest use of single-use plastic. I work for the NHS. The amount of plastic used is unbelievable, even on one ward.
Very true.
We said they must be exempt from that. For medical, I mean, I get through quite a lot of plastic with my medical devices.
I mean, when I was recently in hospital, everything is packaged in little plastic bags and throw away. And
but it's
huge
to be
amount
sterile,
of plastic.
Isn't
Yes,
it? You've got to be
indeed.
sterile. And presumably these other products that they use, cornstarch is one, or sugars and things which
wouldn't
can be used.
be the same. They wouldn't be able to be sterilised in the same way, would they?
Probably not. Though I have got doggy poop bags that are made of cornstarch.
Really?
They look like plastic, but they're cornstarch.
They're biodegradable then, aren't they?
And hopefully they're as...
What a horrible thought.
Hopefully they're as you know...
What?
Well, resilient as plastic.
Well, yeah, but they would be made to biodegrade after a while, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
which is
probably quite quickly once you've used it.
No, let's not go there. Brian says, what are coffee and tea shops going to do with the plastic stock that they already have, bearing in mind they can't dispose of them in the refuse? That's true. A lot of businesses will have an awful lot of plastic stuff.
I suppose the argument is they should have been planning for it. It's like our fella from the Federation of Fish Fryers, who's been, transitioned 3 years ago. They've known it was coming, so they should have phased it out by now. Should have done.
I suppose. Well, hopefully they will have been advised.
Anyway.
Right, let's get on. Shall we bring you up to date with today's front pages? Let's look at the Mail on Sunday, leading with Suella Braverman hitting back at Elton John, who has criticised her. How could he, from his home in Saint-Tropez?
The Observer has the story that the Education Secretary has kept secret files on people critical of schools policy.
The Independent...
They're going to get a detention.
Yes, exactly. Come and see me. The Independent leads with the Tories, who are heading for a wipeout. That's according to their new poll.
And the Sunday Telegraph has the Defence Secretary's comments that British troops could be sent to Ukraine to train troops.
And the Daily Star has a report on a footballer who got up to no good but kept his socks on. Great story.
Goodness sakes. Let's go through some of those with editor Spike Tom Slater and broadcaster Nabila Ramdani.
Morning again. Thank you so much.
Yes, good to see you. Let's have a look at the Observer, Nabila. A third of Tory voters will switch at the next election, it says.
Yes, indeed. That's according to an exclusive poll conducted for The Observer. It suggests that 34% of Conservative voters are currently intending to vote for other parties, so Labour and Lib Dems, in other words. And the context is the competition and indeed the contradictory demands from warring Tory factions ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester. So, this, of course, reflects what a lot of people are already saying, but it makes for very dramatic headlines, not least because general elections are often the expression of general rejections, and there's plenty of evidence that people are sick of the Conservatives. But the big question is, are they so sick that they are prepared to vote a Labour government in, effectively? And that's the real challenge for Keir Starmer. And I think that's what's going to make the conference...
It's whether they all, the third of them, switch to one way of voting, Labour, for instance, or whether they just fragment utterly. which, again, might not give anyone a proper decisive lead.
Yes, I think that's why it's going to make the Conservative conference more exciting than ever. Because, I mean, I've heard some cheeky people calling the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak out because so many of his loyal lieutenants are positioning themselves to take over effectively. So he's got real competition from within his own camp.
Which is what I don't understand. I mean, I know it's a competitive business, but if it's true that Suella Braverman is sort of chasing that top job, you know, with her sort of challenges that they're in the papers this morning, and there's lots to talk about Penny Mordaunt, that she's running around Westminster trying to garner support and all the rest of it. It's like one of those images of a snake eating itself. Yeah. Isn't it? They're just forcing themselves out of power.
Well, I think especially where Rishi Sunak is concerned, he never won a leadership election insofar as he never went to the voters, he never went to the Tory members. He's always had a lot of difficulty stamping his own authority on the party, which is one of the reasons why he's had to be quite cautious on various other things. And I think it's so fascinating as well, just in terms of where we're going to be at in terms of the voters at the next election, because what's so clear is that whilst a lot of people are running away from the Tory party, they feel like they haven't followed through on that mandate that they got in 2019. You know, they've had one scandal after another and they're fed up with them. But at the same time, it's not obvious that people are rushing towards Keir Starmer. I think the big group to watch at the next election will be people who go back to not voting, because that has been the group that's been so decisive in recent years. People who hadn't voted for a very long time or never voted in many cases, they began voting for UKIP, voted for Brexit at the EU referendum, voted for the Brexit Party, and then that kind of became a gateway to voting Tory for many people who historically, given they're from working class communities, often in the North and the Midlands, wouldn't have voted that way. I think a lot of those people are going to go back to not voting, frankly.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it could be a bumpy year for the Lib Dems, because a lot of people, if they don't want to vote, I mean, look, I know they're not that well aligned, but you know, if they can't bring themselves to vote, if they're Tories, can't bring themselves to vote for Labour, maybe they vote for Lib Dem. I mean, it's also protest party.
It's all so volatile at the moment. I think that's one of the things that makes it very hard.
Yes, I think
the old basis of
this poll suggests that the Tories have lost voters in crucial areas, the southern heartlands and the red wall seats in the Midlands, but. I would contend that it's all up for grabs still, because the key issue will remain economics. And there's a lot of sceptical voters who still don't trust Labour with budget, with figures. And so it's going to be incredibly tough. But I would say that a Tory government, however divided it looks at the moment, still has a chance to get in.
Well, Jeremy Hunt, hasn't he, has hinted that they won't call an election until he's confident, or he feels he has already got inflation down to 3% or below. And if he does manage that, that's quite an achievement, isn't it?
And it would be something which people would presumably begin to feel less of the pinch and so on. Maybe that will make people look again at the Conservatives, but it is such a narrow path to victory at this point. I mean, it would be stunning if they managed to even pull it off. But at the same time, you are in a situation where this is not like 1997. This is not the Labour Party riding high.
No, it's not.
Clear sense of, enthusiasm. It just isn't there in relation.
I tell you who may have a narrow path to victory, according to the Mail on Sunday. Meghan Markle, or Meghan Wales, or whatever we're meant to call her now, could be the next senator for California.
Yes, so the headline is, has veteran US politician's death opened door to Senator Meghan? The answer is almost certainly no, but her PR team have been getting to work trying to suggest that after the death of Dianne Feinstein, who was 90, she was the longest-serving...
She's legendary, wasn't she?
Indeed, like a real sort of trailblazer, as people would say. So, you know, she's the longest-serving female senator, long-time politician, and there's obviously this question because now the governor of California essentially has to select someone to fill the role until the next election, and Meghan's PR people seemingly have been quite busy suggesting that maybe she would be in the frame. It's no secret that she has political ambitions. This is something that's been talked about a lot. People even talk about potentially a presidential bid. Now people will of course say, you know, a celebrity suddenly launching themselves into the political stage. When has that ever happened? But
well, in California, it happens, doesn't it?
Well, that's the other thing. The kind of celebrification of politics has been going on for quite a long time, not just in America.
And it doesn't mean they're bad politicians. I mean, Schwarzenegger was a very reliable and well thought of governor for a long time, as of course was Ronald Reagan.
And in some respects, I feel like so many politicians are so vapid vapid anyway. Does it make that much difference these days?
But what's misleading is her PR suggesting she's branded about in Hollywood. She's never been part of that Hollywood bubble.
No.
That's the reality. She's never been anywhere near Hollywood. That's her great, cause for...
But she's a very big name there. She's a good speaker. She has already, espoused certain causes.
Is she, though? I really cannot take this story seriously at all.
I don't know.
She has no constituency at all, as far as I can see. On the contrary, she managed to make herself very unpopular, including in America, where a lot of Americans still have an awful lot of respect for the British royal family. And I'll tell you, even Donald Trump has shown immense respect for the late Queen. As she clearly made Her Majesty's last few years a misery, not least of all by coming up with unfounded accusations about racism. And I'm sorry to say, but I get the feeling that Meghan's only supporter is Prince Harry, but he's not even allowed a vote.
No.
That's true.
No. I don't know. Well, there's nothing wrong with having aspirations. Let's not knock anyone for having aspirations. I'll tell you who I love, who are big on both sides of the Atlantic, and have loved them for years, and that is U2.
Yes. They get my vote.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Anyway, there's, in the States, in Las Vegas, there's this new incredible venue, $2.4 billion it's cost. Anyway, it's opened, and U2 were sort of behind it all. It's a huge sphere of which you can project things on the inside and outside, apparently.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible mountains.
This is a shot of the inside of it.
So this is, so
it's like a big IMAX screen almost.
Yeah, you see
sort of all around
entire deserts and mountains in the background. It's quite dramatic, and it's great as a spectacle.
And good for the cheap seats, I imagine, because you think...
Well, you can't miss it, can you?
So are you two playing a concert there?
And it wouldn't...
Yeah, they've done it, haven't they?
They've already played a concert there.
But I think we got a shot of the edge.
I do wonder if it pushes the music into second place, though, by having this visual distraction, if I may put it that way.
My goodness.
Well, yeah, the band was very small, don't it? But I'll tell you what, if the music and the visuals work hand in hand, then it just makes it a different experience, doesn't it?
Funnily enough, I bumped into them in a hotel in Morocco.
Did you?
You too?
I saw this character at the breakfast table outdoors wearing a beanie hat under extreme heat.
Oh, that'd be the edge then.
I was very polite.
Did you go up and say anything?
I did, because I was cheeky.
Don't you?
But I was
to grab
polite.
your moment, don't you?
I called him Mr. Edge.
Yeah.
Mr. Edge.
Very formal.
And Bono turned up, and we ended up talking about Northern Ireland politics.
Oh, Lord.
Good Lord.
And he said, we got there in the end. We got them all to sit around a table and talk.
But I think that's lovely. If you ever do bump into, quite by accident, somebody, a celebrity or somebody you know, they don't know you, but you really know them. I think you've got to grab the bull by the horns and say something politely.
hello.
But some
You've got to have your
celebrities
moment,
respond well to that.
Yeah.
Others will...
Others don't.
Well, if they don't, then more
But I
fool
never
them.
understood that, because what's the point of wanting to be famous if you don't want love from your constituency?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, do you remember Cara Lawrence, who... she's been on the show a couple of times. She works for is it Mind? She has... she's got Down, she's got a mental disability, and she works for the charity... Is it Mind? Oh, my mind's gone blank now. But she works for the charity that helps people with learning disabilities and learning difficulties. She does a podcast called the Pink Sparkle Podcast, which I've been on. It's brilliant. But she's had the edge on that because he's her cousin.
Wow.
What a weird small world.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
So she may well be watching this morning, you never know.
Winning if you are.
So there you go. Weird small world. Very importantly to me, Tom, because I think the whole avocado on toast thing is ridiculous and very posh.
I'm looking forward to mine when I get home.
You see, but now apparently the Observer's saying it's all being ditched for peas.
Yeah, this is the new kind of brunch smashed substance on toast of choice. It seems like, I don't know if it's because it's cheaper or whether or not it's something which people are just bored of one trend, so they're going with the other. But yes, apparently peas on toast, the hashtag has been doing the rounds on TikTok, on social media. It's become one of the kind of hip brunch spots, something which is increasingly on the menu. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but then I wasn't a big fan of the avocado on
I
toast.
love peas, but not on toast.
Oh, I don't know. But if they're fresh and raw, Because fresh raw peas, if you ever...
You try keeping them on the toast, then, if they're fresh and raw. Or are you going to keep them on the
Well,
toast?
you guys still have to smash them.
Yeah.
But that would be the thing, is if you ever... We used to grow our lamb veg.
Oh, I love fresh peas. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, straight out the pod. Unbelievable.
I'm a city girl.
I love it.
Mushy peas on toast could be good.
Oh, now that I'd definitely go for with a splash of gravy on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you've never had mushy peas, have you?
No, I don't like much. Still can't even bring myself to try them. But I love peas. I do love garden peas. Smashing.
Peas. What would you like on
Butter
toast?
and black pepper.
I don't know. I'm not too fond of bread in general.
Oh, give up.
I just
You're
like...
French.
Are you saying you never
go get a baguette every morning?
No, I think that's an overrated thing. It's mainly white bread. It's dough. It's got zero nutritional value.
Yes, but it's crispy and gorgeous.
If I am to have bread, I'd rather have something that brings something to the party. Like
Sacre bleu.
Are you saying, Adelia, you've never, cracked open that tin of baked beans?
I have.
Slice of Hovis white.
I have. Cup of tea, baked beans.
Bread is I think bread is one of the best things in the world.
Well, and it's one of the best things about going to France is having properly baked fresh baguettes in the morning with a nice bit of brie.
I think it became... it was celebrated by UNESCO as part of, French heritage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's the first thing we learn about in school, isn't it? About boulangerie.
Yes, that's right.
So it's an important thing for English people to know.
It is. Yeah.
But you see, tomatoes on toast is a big thing, especially in Spain. Your
Bruschetta.
tostada con tomate.
And bruschetta.
Oh, see, bruschetta.
That's beautiful.
See, listen to me. I'm almost bilingual. No, whenever I'm in Spain, it's what I always go out, always have.
I think it must be something about breakfast television as well. When you've been on air for a long time, from early in the morning, all you can think about is food.
And sleep.
And sleep.
That's all
Food
you
and
talk
sleep.
about.
Yeah.
Honestly, food and sleep. Anyway, on that note, you two can go and sleep and feed yourselves.
Yes.
It's been very good to see you both.
Yeah, we'll be after you soon.
Au revoir.
Yeah.
Au revoir.
Let's have a look at the weather for you.
Hello, I'm Marco Petagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far southwest of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the southeast, it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with one or two showers towards the north and northwest. In the sunshine towards the southeast, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, the mid-70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far southeast should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells towards the north and northwest and a few showers once again toward the far northwest of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down towards the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
Well, do stay with us. We've got lots coming up, particularly from the Conservative Party conference, where we'll be all day and no doubt for the next 4 days.
Yeah, we will.
Well, Dishy Rishi turns into Rishi Sunak.
So, yes, apparently. That's going to be his nickname. Is that... I mean, that would be a disaster for the trying to stay in government, wouldn't it? But maybe he can calm the waters. Maybe he can create some clear blue water.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 1st of October. These are the stories we've been covering on Breakfast this morning, and the Conservative Party conference is kicking off in Manchester today. First gathering since Rishi Sunak became PM, and of course we're there throughout the next 4 days.
A ban on single-use plastics comes into force in England today. Plastic plates, trays, cutlery, bowls and certain cups and containers will be banned, but not disposable vapes or supermarket ready meals.
British troops will be deployed in Ukraine for the first time, according to the Defence Secretary, while our Navy may be moved into the Black Sea.
And the Windsor framework replacement for the Northern Ireland Protocol comes into force today. The deal will ease controls on goods entering from the mainland, but many unionists still see it as an Irish sea border.
Forecast heading away very shortly with Markle.
Hello, good morning. We've got a mixed bag of weather in store across the UK through the day today. There'll be some rain in some areas, sunshine elsewhere, but I'll have all the details later on.
Well, it's lovely to be with you. I'm Anne Diamond.
I'm Stephen Dixon. This is Breakfast on GB News. Just if you're panicking from that headline about Ukraine, by the way...
Which you could easily panic at.
You could. We're not putting boots on the ground to fight. The suggestion is, or the claim is, writing in, I think it's the Telegraph.
It's the Telegraph.
That Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, wants to move our troops who are already in the area to train Ukrainian soldiers in
Ukraine.
Which is
a move, because up until now we have been training Ukrainian soldiers, both here in Britain and in Poland, for instance, and elsewhere along the border. But we have made the very moot point of not taking them into Ukraine. And it would appear that after Grant Shapps went out to Ukraine to see President Zelensky, he has now promised that he will actually move our troops into Ukraine to train, which is a move, and you just wonder why.
I think it's worrying.
Doing it. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
Because it will be misinterpreted, possibly deliberately misinterpreted by Moscow.
But it also makes them a target, puts them in the line of fire.
I think so too.
Which is a worry. The last thing we want to do is lose anybody. But anyway, if you've got a view on that, let us know, and we'll no doubt get some clarification during Conservative Party conference. Heartthrobs have been talking about this morning as well. Apparently they're going out of fashion.
Well, that's what some columnists seem to think, that the age of the heartthrob is over.
Are they old columnists who just have lost their
Do youngsters still have posters on their bedroom walls with the heartthrob there?
Well, they certainly used to, including Paul from Hartlepool, morning Paul, who's letting us know today that Debbie Harry, Blondie, was his heartthrob when he was in his mid-teens. And he did a drawing of it in 1980 that he still has on his wall. Oh, actually, that's very good.
That is good. Oh, you're a talented artist.
You are talented.
Yeah. That was Debbie Harry, yeah.
Very good.
That looks like an intimate portrait as well, doesn't it? It's nicer than an ordinary poster.
It's very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had an interview with Debbie Harry recently, and she said when they were starting out, and she did one gig, and her dress was made entirely of razor blades.
Oh, crumbs. Yes, I think I remember that dress.
I mean, can you imagine? Crackers.
Hopefully nice
things you do. Things you do. Dear me. Anyway, look on to more serious matters for you this morning. Conservative Party conference kicks off today with Rishi Sunak at the helm for the first time.
And what a year, or under a year, it's been for the Prime Minister, from trying to stop the boats to delaying net zero. He's been busy trying.
Yeah, but still trailing in the polls, though. If you read some of them, they are narrowing. Nevertheless, facing pressure from his party, particularly, of course, this week over issues like HS2 and the ongoing issue of immigration.
Interesting, the HS2 thing, given that the conference is going on in Manchester at the moment. Will he make this conference the opportunity to turn around his premiership? And in what direction?
Yeah, let's talk to our colleague Camilla Tominey. Her show's coming up at 9:30, of course, live from conference. And it's going to be a tricky few days, isn't it, for the PM and the Cabinet?
I think make or break is the phrase, Steve. I mean, at the end of the day, he's got to deliver a pretty barnstorming speech on Wednesday to carry the Tories through. I think, as you've just referenced there, they will be emboldened by some fairly positive polling in all of places. The Observer, would you believe? So opinion, which would usually associate with perhaps a bit more left-leaning in terms of pollsters, has come out with this poll to suggest that the gap between Labour and the Conservatives has narrowed to just 10 points. Now, that is significant because over the summer it was more than 20. Why is that? Because of the clampdown, we think, on net zero and the idea that some of those Tories that felt completely disaffected following the fall not just of Boris Johnson but also Liz Truss, they sort of stayed at home during the locals. They're not that keen on Rishi Sunak, at least they weren't. But do they now look upon the PM a little bit more favourably now that he's performed this climate climb down? So we'll be looking at that. I've got some great guests on the show today, guys. I've got Michael Gove coming up. Now, don't forget, he was initially quite a net zero zealot, and he's had to climb down himself because he was the one who was only very recently saying, no, we're not going to delay the ban on diesels and petrols. So we'll be speaking to him. He's the Levelling Up Secretary. Of course, I'm going to have to ask him about HS2. We're in Manchester, and this leg of the rail project isn't going to come to Manchester, it seems. Tax cuts, and talking about tax is also a main focus of attention here. I'm going to be speaking to Priti Patel. Her Conservative Democratic organisation has been pushing for tax cuts. People like her and Liz Truss have signed this letter saying we will not support any budget that puts taxes up. So I'll be intrigued to ask her a bit more about that, and also go to Gove and say, look, is this feasible? Because the Chancellor keeps on saying they're not going to cut taxes. But if Rishi Sunak wants to be ever more popular in the polls with his own voters, he might need to look in that direction.
And there are lots of sort of ministers and ex-ministers and former ministers having their say about various topics, trying to make headlines, I guess, for the first day. How is Rishi Sunak going to cope with these various vultures which seem to be circling around his job?
That's right, Anne. Not so much a nest of singing birds as a nest of vipers, the Conservative Party. We've got a little bit of freelancing going on today. Look, they've all been set up by Number 10, these interviews. But we've got Kemi Badenoch talking about the fact that we should be leaving the ECHR. Interestingly, Michael Gove echoes that a little bit in his interview with The Sun on Sunday. He says, you know, leaving the ECHR should be on the table. I'm going to probe that a bit further and ask that also of Priti Patel. As a former Home Secretary, I'd like to know what she makes of Suella Braverman's comments in the week. Braverman's back in the newspapers as well, talking about the people who are opposed to her immigration policies, like Sir Elton John being liberal elitists and need to keep their noses out. We've also heard from Grant Shapps, as you two have just been describing, talking about stepping up this idea of British troops being slightly more operational in Ukraine. He's been speaking about that. So look, there's a lot going on, and I think Rishi Sunak's main priority will be to try and keep these Tories that are going out on a limb on tax and have been quite judgmental on some WhatsApp groups about his leaderships. One of his colleagues describing him as apparently having the charisma of a doorknob, according to leaked messages. Not the best way to start conference, is it?
No, why is it that, I mean, you get it in all parties, but I mean, particularly in the Conservatives at the moment, that they almost seem determined to eat themselves before the next election?
I've completely lost sound there, Stephen, so I'm afraid I can't hear what you're asking me. But if you want me to wax lyrical further about the PM, then I'm more than happy to.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Can she? I don't know. She probably can't hear. She can't hear us.
Well, anyway, her
because
show's
it was a
later.
very, very fine question, Camilla, if you watch this back. Fine question.
Jolly good.
But this is what I don't understand. And actually, I keep saying Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is, you know, obviously on this channel, who I've never met in the flesh. I'd like to sit down with him at some point and say, why do you... Because he's one who was very much backing Boris, you know, after he'd gone and all this sort of thing. If it causes dissent and is likely to make the party lose the next election, why do they pursue it? Is that more important to pursue that rather than to try and pursue a victory?
I suppose they're looking at the long term.
Maybe.
They may even be considering what it's going to be like to actually be out of office in the long term. That's when they can carve their new careers. Looking forward to the election after, I suppose. I mean, if you're in politics, you are usually in it for the long game, aren't you?
I mean, isn't it interesting? Of all the years, I mean, I've been talking politics and you've been doing it longer, that you wouldn't want to be a politician for all the tea in China.
No.
It's a messy game.
Yeah, it's messy, and also, don't you think? I mean, you even if your heart is totally in it and you completely believe in what you're doing, every 4 or 5 years you have to go out and knock on people's doors and beg for their vote again and again. It doesn't matter how important you ever have been. In the world of politics, I mean, I suppose that's probably a good thing, but after your period in government, for a while, then you have to go out and just be an ordinary bloke again, you know, on a top of a soapbox trying to garner support in order to keep your job. Not many of us do that, I suppose.
No,
it's certainly not a job for life, is it?
I enjoy talking about politics, but I wouldn't want to do it.
No. I mean, does it seem a long time ago to you that Boris Johnson was Prime Minister?
Yes, it does.
Seems ages ago. Well, actually, it's not that long ago at all.
You can't sort of imagine it in a weird way.
No. And I wonder how he's viewing it as well, whether he is looking upon it as a long-term thing.
I don't know.
Or whether he has actually said, no, that's the end of my political...
I don't know if he's... you know, I don't know him well enough to know whether he'll be the sort of person who's chomping at the bit to get back in, or whether he's sat back somewhere laughing his socks off because it's not him.
I don't know. You look at Tony Blair, he can't give it up, can he?
No, he can't give it up. Interesting, I saw Theresa May about a year ago when all the hoo-ha was kicking off, and I said, well, why, Theresa, I bet you're glad you're not in there now.
No way.
Didn't respond. She nodded and smiled at me, but she wouldn't give me an answer.
No, I think she's still playing her long game, really.
Yeah, interesting. You have to be a special breed to be a politician. Anyway, At 11 minutes past 9, let's just bring you up to date with what else is happening. And as we've already mentioned, actually, it's been reported that British troops could be sent to Ukraine for the first time since the invasion began. This is in the Sunday Telegraph, and the Defence Secretary has said there are plans to move a British training programme into Ukraine, and it follows Grant Shapps' visit to the country last week.
A fall in Ofgem's energy price cap has come into effect amid concerns that households could still end up paying around 13% more than they did last winter. The regulator announced in August that the cap on a unit of gas and electricity would reduce the average bill to just under £2,000 for the next 3 months. Some analysts, though, predict the cap will rise again by around 3.5% in January because of increases in wholesale energy prices.
And over in the States, the government there has avoided federal shutdown after the House of Representatives and the Senate approved a temporary funding bill. It drops aid to Ukraine, which is going to be an issue. How that gets resolved, I don't know. Federal disaster assistance, though, has been increased by $16 billion, so whether they just dip out of that fund, I don't know. And this is going to last until November the 17th, from which point they go through it all over again.
Sometimes it's nice to feel that although, we think our politics is completely crazy, you only have to look over the pond, don't you? Sometimes you see something crazier going on.
Yes. We've never had it so good. Or something like that.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
Now, from today, businesses in England banned from selling using single-use plastic. So it's cutlery, polystyrene cups, food containers, all part of the government's efforts to protect the environment. But, of course, it does pose some problems for business owners.
Our reporter Ray Addison went to Woodstock in Oxfordshire to find out how two very different businesses are dealing with the change.
Dirty streets and polluted waterways. That's the legacy of single-use plastics. However, from today, the government is forcing most business owners to go green or face tough fines. At the more than 300-year-old Blenheim Palace in Woodstock, they're replacing 500,000 single-use coffee cups with 17,000 that can be washed and returned, saving 35 tonnes of CO2. David Green is head of innovation.
We serve over 400,000 hot drinks at Blenheim, and many of those cups, even though they're compostable, can only be composted up to about 5% with food waste. So actually eradicating single-use cups really does fit into our overall strategy of becoming carbon neutral by 2027.
The company behind Blenheim's high-tech coffee cup revolution is Reuniverse, which offers a range of reusable food and drink containers. Founder Tony McGurk explains how it works.
This cup has some really neat technology in it. So it has a QR code on the side to give it an identity to you as a consumer, and it has underneath an RFID chip enabled in the cup itself so that we know where the cup is and what it's doing when it gets returned. You'll go into a coffee shop, you'll buy your coffee as you normally would do, and you'll pay a deposit on that cup. So rather than here's a paper cup, throw it away, you now have a cup that is reusable and rewashable, and you've invested £2 in it, for instance. So if you want your £2 back, you'll make sure it comes back and gets washed and reused.
Do you need a receipt? But revolutions are expensive. Just a few minutes walk away from Blenheim Palace is Smart's fish and chip shop. Owner Ricardo Camara says meeting the new regulations is costing him hundreds.
Plastic bags, cups, lids, boxes, bin liners, other bits and bobs, I'm going to lose easily £600 worth of items.
This is just the latest challenge Ricardo has faced to his livelihood. During COVID, he was forced to close down his restaurant. Now, after a brief time of being back on his feet, once again, he's worried for the future.
I lost big time money around the COVID.
What is this?
Then I decided to take this one over. I take another risk. Now this thing comes along again. Salsa vinegar on the chips?
Yes, please. Ricardo believes he has around 6 months to see if he can stay profitable. And in the meantime, his increased overheads will have to be passed on to his customers.
I cannot take from my own pocket, So whatever I bring it in, I have to increase in the price.
The government says 95% of the public supports the single-use plastic ban, but at a time when many are struggling with the cost of living, its impact could help the environment but damage the high street. Ray Addison, GB News, Woodstock.
Elaine says, morning Elaine, why don't you get a 10p back on a plastic bottle when you take it back? Then everyone would go around picking up plastic bottles to get a bit of money back, like what they did with aluminium cans. And in the old days, of course, we took glass bottles back to the shop for 10p.
Yeah, true. Chris and Mark say single-use plastic isn't the problem. People disposing of cups by throwing them in a hedge, as they do out of cars onto my rural lane, are the problem. Actually, I don't think you're right. Because even when you recycle all this stuff, what they've discovered is they recycle it by shipping it somewhere else. It all just ends up, and then they dump it at the other end.
Yes, they do.
So it's actually we've got to stop it at source. So I disagree with you on that one, but people litterers like that are a disgrace.
It's disgusting.
Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony says in Mansfield District Council, if you put lightweight plastics, like carrier bags, for instance, in your recycle bin, they refuse to empty your bin.
Why?
It's different in different places, isn't it? But It is manic that it doesn't seem to be any joined-up thinking on this.
I know, it's absolutely crackers, which I may say a lot over the coming 12 hours or so. Coming up, a tree surgeon will be in the studio to talk about giving a tree a new life. This is GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yesterday we were talking about Beardy Ian, do you remember? Ella Whelan's husband.
Yeah, well, we're going to meet him.
Is it
now? Because people, visitors and locals have been told to stop visiting the site of the former Sycamore Gap tree in Northumberland. Of course, you know what we mean, don't you? That wonderful tree, Hadrian's Wall, somebody went along and literally just cut it down in the most awful act of vandalism that has united people. But we still don't know why, we still don't know who did it.
No.
But the big question is, can that tree ever live again? And if so, how? Well, we're joined in the studio by tree surgeon Ian Llewellyn.
Go on, say Beardy Ian.
Morning.
Beardy Ian, yes, that's right.
No, without the beard.
Ella was talking about you. But, yeah, so by business, you are a tree surgeon,
Yes.
so you know this sort of stuff.
Yep.
What I'm amazed at is that somebody took one of these enormous, great, what do you call them? Circular chainsaws, that's it, to that tree and cut it. What looks like you'll be able to give us the verdict, but they seem to cut a really very neat cut, and then the tree came down. So, given that what you've got is a stump with a very neat cut along the top, what can then happen to that tree?
Well, there's the potential, and some people have already raised this, that the stump could regenerate. So, although the upper part of the tree has been cut down and will now die away.
Yeah, nothing will come up through that stump.
But the stump still is, its root system is still intact. We'll probably still have some dormant buds around the base, and there's the potential that it could resprout. And although, you know, the form of the tree, which was part of its beauty and the reason it was so iconic, although that has probably been ruined, the tree could regenerate in some way, and it's not necessarily dead.
Do you have to do anything to it then to help it regenerate?
Well, it says they say they've put up a fence now to stop people, you know, visiting. It seems like because of this outpouring of grief, there's lots of people have come to take a look. But if it was protected, you know, the fence kept there to stop.
People
animals,
just tramping all over, or animals,
or people, you know, sometimes someone might want to, you know, like people take home a piece of the Berlin Wall.
Oh,
if there's a fresh
yes,
sprout,
that would be awful.
a lovely fresh sprout, someone might say, oh, look at that, and, you know, take a picture of it.
If you like a big dinner plate, right, you've got the big stump, that starts to rot.
Yeah.
But you've got other shoots coming up around it. How long would it take before any of them formed into a recognisable tree? Well, it's a sycamore, isn't it?
It is a sycamore, yeah. And they're very hardy. They're renowned for being for resprouting once they've been cut down. So it's certainly not the end. The next year, the coming spring will tell us. But what you'd expect is a number instead of one single stem. You know, what we call a maiden, which is a tree with one single stem. You'll have multiple stems, which will all grow very tall and straight, but it won't be that classic tree.
It'll never look the same again, but it would be lovely if it lived in some way.
You know, in some way, you know, Rome was sacked how many times? And it's still there. You know, it's different, but it's still Rome.
Yeah.
Perhaps the Sycamore Gap will still have a sycamore.
Mm.
I was wondering if they could weave it together. If they had lots of different stems, you could weave it together and create something wonderful. But we've got to leave it there. We're out of time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Camilla Tominey is up next after your weather.
Hello, I'm Marco Patenia. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We'll see a mixed bag of weather across the UK over the next few days. Most of us seeing some rain at times, but when the sun pops through, it should feel fairly warm for the time of year. We've got a bit of a three-way split weather-wise across the UK through the day today. A slow-moving band of rain affecting Wales, parts of northern England, the North Midlands, even at times working into the far southwest of England there. Some of that rain heavy for a while, but tending to ease as we go into the afternoon. Whereas towards the southeast it's a brighter picture, mostly fine here, and brighter with one or two showers towards the north and northwest. In the sunshine towards the southeast, becoming quite warm. Temperatures here peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius, the mid-70s in Fahrenheit, and even towards the north at 17 or 18 degrees. It's pretty warm for the time of year. As we head through the evening and overnight, that band of rain continues to affect some central and southern parts of the UK. Fairly patchy rain here, and I think the far southeast should again stay fine with some clear spells, with clearer spells toward the north and northwest and a few showers once again toward the far northwest of the UK. A warm night in the south at 15 or 16 degrees, a little bit fresher towards the north at nearer 10 to 11 Celsius. As for Monday, well, once again, outbreaks of rain affect some central and southern parts of the UK, if anything tending to pep up through the day in some parts, so some heavy bursts developing across parts of Wales, the Midlands, and locally down toward the far southwest of England as we go through Monday. Towards the southeast, a brighter picture with a few showers, and brighter with showers towards the far north too, but again, fairly warm in the sunshine towards the southeast.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to